The guild's #1 ace swung with everything he had. The F rank they sealed away 25 years ago caught it with one hand. To explain that, rewind 25 years. Back then they graded my talent, refine, as worthless F rank and dropped me. It only processed monster cores, so a guild used me in a back room. Then they found every core I refined, left a residue my body kept, and I couldn't stop absorbing it. So they sealed me in the vault to farm it, and slept me while their entire stockpile bled inside. I woke holding it all, too raw to swing a fraction of it. Now the guild that buried me is #1 in the world, and I'm walking back in to take back everything they built on me. I had already counted the ladder between here and there. One reading at the door to score me the lowest band there is, held to a lie by a wall I would not let slip. One floor to climb without a single number ever giving me away, and one ace to catch bare-handed in front of the crowd that crowned him. Then one last night, the anniversary, the hall, 25 clean years lit for the whole world, to walk into as the man they had erased. 4 rungs between an F-rank band and that stage, and I would take every one of them a fraction of myself at a time. Rewind 25 years, I stood on a grading floor with everyone else. A machine read our talents one by one. When my turn came, the reader clicked, hummed, and printed a single letter. F worthless. The examiner did not even look up, refine they called it. It did one thing, feed it a raw monster core, and it gave back clean, spendable power. That was all, no fire. No blade, nothing a camera could film. And on a board that only counts what shows on camera, nothing meant nobody. You have to understand what a core is worth. When the gates opened, the whole world learned that power came out of dead monsters in hard little nuggets. Raw, a core will burn you out if you touch its charge direct. Refined, it runs a city. Every guild needs someone to turn the poison into money, and every guild credits the hunter who spends that money on camera, never the hand that made it safe. I was going to be that hand, I just did not know it yet. So they dropped me, just like that. No school, no rank, no name, I did not argue. Arguing needs standing, and I had none. Cold came first before anything else. Then light, pale and flat, filtering down through frost-fogged glass. My eyes opened on a ceiling I had never seen wake from. I lay still and listened to a motor grinding somewhere above me, old, complaining, the sound of a seal that had not moved in a very long time. I tried to sit up. My arm did not so much lift as leave. It moved a hand's width past where I aimed it, and the crate beside me took the overshoot instead. Wood cracked once, sharp, then gave all at once, and the whole thing came apart into splinters across the floor. I had barely committed to the motion. I had meant a lean, nothing more. Something in me had answered with a blow. I stared at my own hand for a long moment before I trusted it to move again. A guild scooped me up within a week of the drop, not for glory. For plumbing, they needed raw cores turned into currency, cheap, and a dropped nobody is the cheapest thing there is. They put me in a back room with no window and a stack of cores, feed one in. Wait, take the clean power out. Set it on the cart, do it again. I wore a collar and a chair, while the men who spent what I made wore rank bands and stood on stages. A station reader hung over the workbench, the same as every processing floor in the guild. A C-rank refiner clears about 12 cores a shift, binning maybe 1 in 4 as unsalvageable. That was the number the wall printed for everyone else. I cleared closer to 200 a night and binned none, and nobody upstairs read that column, because nobody upstairs was looking for it. I did not mind the work. It was the only thing that had ever answered when I called it. Give me a core and I could see the whole shape of it, the clean line through the poison, the exact place the power wanted to come apart clean. Other refiners guessed. I never had to. I got my feet under me, slow, testing the floor the way you test ice. Frost had crept over everything, the crates, the racks, a maintenance panel bolted to the wall by the door. The panel had woken with the motor, dates scrolling across a cracked little screen. I read the first one and did not believe it. I read it again. The number did not move. More than 2 decades had gone by while I lay in the cold, and I had not felt 1 hour of it. I put a hand to my own face and found it unchanged, smooth, exactly as it had been. The frost had kept me. The world had not. Something started happening in that back room that I did not report. Every core I refined left a trace behind, a thin residue of power that soaked into me and stayed. It did not wash out. It did not fade, it only added. Core after core, month after month, it built inside me like silt in a slow river. I said nothing. Nobodies who speak up become problems, and problems get replaced. Then leadership noticed. They ran a quiet reading on me one afternoon, thinking I would not understand it. I understood it fine. The reader hummed and printed, refinement efficiency, 97%, core stability, full, and made the tester run it twice, because that was not an F-rank number. It was higher than the guild's own ace, their crowned hunter, outstated by the janitor they kept in the dark. I remember the officer's face when he saw it, not shock. Calculation. Chestnut hair, neatly parted, a command sash he wore too proudly for a man on the floor. Darrow. He took the reading, folded it away, and left without a word. A man who finds something does not announce it. He hides it and decides what it is worth. Here is the math I learned later. A man who quietly outperforms your star, and does it just by working, is not a person to that kind of officer. He is a resource. You do not free a resource, you do not credit it. You keep it running, and you keep it quiet. I steadied myself against the doorframe and pushed off, careful this time, weight forward in careful stages instead of all at once. Better. Barely. I let out something like 1 thread in 10,000 of whatever lived in me now, aiming only for a step forward, and the frame still groaned under my palm like I had shoved it with both hands. 1 thread in 10,000, and it still nearly took the door off its hinges, so they did not promote me. They did not thank me, they sealed me. The vault was a frost chamber deep under the guild, steel walls, a cold that bit through cloth, the whole core stockpile stored inside it like money in a bank. They walked me in and called it a special assignment. Long-term. Well paid. They even smiled when they said it. I believed them for about a minute, until I saw the seal on the door, a thing built to close once and stay closed, and understood no one who walked in here was meant to walk out. A younger officer stood at the wheel, heavy-set, scarred hands not meeting my eyes. He was only the hands. Darrow stayed somewhere else, keeping clean. That is how it is always done. They slept me. That is the cleanest word for it. Not killed? That would have ended the residue, and they needed me producing. So they froze me half alive beside their entire fortune and let it bleed into me, year after year, while the world went on without one thought spared for the contractor who retired. No sentence was read. No door needed to open again. Just time. 25 years of it, spent while I could not feel a single day pass. The horror was never a blade, it was that. I flexed the fingers of my right hand, alone, no Creighton reached to test them on this time. Nothing broke. Small mercy. I flexed them again, harder, and the air itself seemed to flinch a half step off my skin, a pressure with nowhere to land. Still holding. Barely. I tried it on something smaller. A bolt head stood proud of the maintenance panel, a finger's width of cold steel, and I set one fingertip against it and asked for the least I could ask for, a hair of a thread, a fraction of the fraction I had spent on the doorframe. The bolt sheared off flush with the plate and rang once on the floor. I had aimed to nudge it. I stood there counting the ways that was wrong. A hair of a thread, and it had cut steel like the steel had agreed to it beforehand. Whatever lived in me did not have a low setting. It had off, and it had far too much, and nothing yet in between. I did the reading on myself, the way I had done it on 1,000 cores, standing there in the cold with the splintered crate at my feet. A core gives you a number every time, efficiency, stability, something to write on a cart tag. I turned that same reading inward and got nothing a cart tag could hold, no letter. No band, no grade. The needle simply ran past every mark printed on the dial and kept going, off the edge of the instrument into a range nothing had ever been built to measure. Not a number that had grown, an ocean, sitting where a river used to be, and no gate built anywhere in me to aim it through. That was when I saw the core. It sat on the floor among the shattered wood. Corrupted, I could read that at a glance. Unstable. Ruined. The kind the modern world would throw away and the old world could not fix. It still held a shape inside it, a living pattern, but the pattern was coming apart. I did not decide to touch it. My hand was already reaching. Whatever leaked out of me reached the core first, a clean, steadying charge, more than enough, far more than enough, and the pattern held. The core cracked open along 100 glowing seams. Something climbed out of it. Small, low to the ground, 4 legs and a spined crest of frost blue plating. It came together wrong on purpose, the way a broken cup glued back keeps its lines. One foreleg sat a little short. One eye did not match the other. Its tail ended in a refrozen stub. The seams where it had welded back together glowed a faint, cold blue, no brighter than embers, just enough to see by, and I understood those seams were the only reason it was alive at all. Dim meant quiet. Any brighter would mean something in it was straining. It looked at me, not afraid. Not confused, it knew me. It had reformed, attuned to the thing that saved it, and the thing that saved it was me. I had not tamed it. I had not called it, it simply chose the reason it existed. I crouched, slow, so slow, afraid I would break it the way I had broken the crate. But the charge that lived in it, and the charge that lived in me were the same charge. It did not flinch from the flood in my hands. It leaned into it. Whatever I was now, it was the one thing in the world I could touch without ruining. It pressed its cracked head against my palm. Cold. Alive. Mine, in the only way that word had ever meant anything. The seam light along its spine warmed half a shade the longer my hand stayed steady, dimming again the instant I so much as thought about letting more of myself out, a gauge with only one reading I wanted to see, and only one way to keep it there. Rhyme, I said. The word came out before I chose it. It fit. The cold that made it. The cold that made me. I sat on the vault floor with a reassembled creature under my hand, and I let the truth arrive the way cold arrives, from the edges in. The men who threw me away had made me the strongest thing alive, by accident, as a side effect of stealing from me. I did not feel triumph. Triumph is loud, and loud was the one thing I could not afford. What I felt was level. Cold and level, and very clear. Here was the joke of it. They had scored me worthless and been so sure that they built a whole system on top of the score. They kept me because I was too small to matter and too useful to waste. By farming me for 25 years, they had made the very thing they scored an F into the largest reserve of power any person had ever carried. I did not earn it in a fight. I earned it lying down. That would be the hardest part for them to swallow, later, when it was too late to swallow anything. The problem had not changed, only the scale of it. I held everything and could express almost none of it. A lean shattered a crate, a careful push nearly took a door off its hinges. A flex of my own fingers pushed the air itself half a step aside. Strength was not my trouble, and had never been my trouble. Holding it was. Every rung from here down to the guild gate would be measured the same way, not by how much I could move, but by how little of it I let out on purpose. There was a bulletin bolted to the wall by the vault door, half lit, automated, the only thing in the room that had kept running the whole time I hadn't. It listed the guild standings: Ashford. #1 in the world. The words meant nothing to me and then meant everything. They had built that on me, on the fact of me, erased. I read the standings twice, the same way I'd read the maintenance panel twice, waiting for the number to move. It did not move either time. I stood up. Rhyme stood with me, seams glowing that same low, steady blue, waiting on whatever I did next the way it would keep waiting for a long time to come. I was going to walk back in. 200 meters above the vault, Darrow Hale was rehearsing how the story ended. He stood at the head of a long table, iron-gray hair swept back, the ox blood and black mantle of the guildmaster sitting easy on his shoulders now, though it had not always. The anniversary set piece runs here, an aide was saying. Ascension Hall, full press, the founder's story front and center. Good, Darrow said. 25 clean years. That was the number he kept, the way another man keeps a lucky coin. The record said Ashford earned its crown on its aces, and the record was the only truth that outlived anyone. He had made sure of that himself. Once there had been a variable, a backroom hand with a reading that should not have existed. He had solved it the way a good officer solves anything, permanently, quietly, off the books. A board had scored the man worthless. Taking a worthless man's output was not theft, it was efficiency. He had told himself that so many times it had worn smooth as the coin. Guildmaster. Vera Lang came in without knocking, copper auburn bob silvering at the temples, a tablet already lit in her hand. She ran the story and had for a quarter century, which was what made her good at believing it. The real, Darrow said. Cut and locked. Footage rolled, gate after gate, the golden ace lifting his crown to a roaring hall, a clean unbroken climb from nothing to #1. Every founder credited, every clear accounted for. There was a man who should have been in that footage and was not. Neither of them said so. And the date? She tapped the screen. A calendar bloomed, one night lit in Ashford cyan. Locked. Invitations are out. Nothing changes now. Nothing changes now, Darrow repeated and liked the sound of it. 25 clean years. One more night to seal them into history. He could feel the finish of it, smooth as the coin in his pocket. 2 floors down, in a cold the celebration would never think about, the man that Real had erased was already awake, already moving, and the countdown they had just set for themselves ran straight toward the one night he most wanted to be in the room. Darrow just did not know it yet. The wrist reader clamped onto my arm and lit up. I stood in the intake line of the guild that had buried me, in a borrowed coat 2 sizes too plain, and I waited for the band to betray me. One spike. One flicker of the truth in me, and this was over before it started. I clamped down. All the way down. Full off. It is the only thing I had learned to do so far. I cannot dial myself. I cannot pour a measured cup. I can only shut the whole flood behind a wall and hold it there with everything I have, or let all of it out at once. There is no in-between yet, so I held the wall, and I did not breathe, and I made myself the smallest thing in the room. The reader hummed and began printing, field by field, the way it was built to. Name, Rook. Rank, F-class, Refinar. Core compatibility, lowest band on the scale. Refinement efficiency, unranked, insufficient data. Core stability, full, steady, betraying nothing, the lowest rung there is. A nobody's number, exactly the number I wanted, and the win was that it read like nothing at all. Holding a wall for 6 seconds and having a machine believe you is not a thing anyone would applaud. It is also the only kind of win I get to have right now, and I took it. The intake officer did not even look at my face. Processing floor. Report to the gray wing. He waved me through with the back of his hand. I walked into Ashford as a bottom band nobody, and not one machine in the building knew that the largest reserve of power alive had just come through the door. It should have been harder to get in. That was the thing that told me how safe they felt. A man they sealed in a vault should be a name on a watch list, a face at every checkpoint. Instead, the door read my band, saw the lowest number there is, and lost interest. Their guard was not down because they were careless. Their guard was down because, to them, I was finished business. You do not post a sentry over a grave. I let them keep thinking it. Every hour they spent certain I was gone was an hour I could spend learning the building they had grown on top of me. The place had changed. I had refined by hand in a windowless room. Now there were rows of humming machines under exhaust hoods, half-automated, feeding cores through on belts. The world had moved on 25 years while I slept beside its fortune. I made my face blank and let it all wash over me. The readers on every wrist, the new top band I saw glowing on a poster, a grade above the old ceiling that had not existed in my day. I filed it away. A man learns a room fastest by pretending he belongs in it. You're new. A girl had appeared at my elbow. Maybe 19. Tan, freckled, wiry, warm brown hair cut short and messy, a mustard yellow scarf that was the only bit of color on the whole gray floor. She had a rookie's patched coveralls and a rookie's easy way of talking to strangers. I'm Juno, she said. You look lost. Everyone looks lost the first day. Don't worry, the machines do most of it. You just watch the flags and clear the jams. I said my name was Rook and nothing else. Quiet type. That's fine. She fell into step beside me like we had done this 100 times. It's mostly boring down here. The hunters get the cameras. We get the cores. But somebody's got to make the power before anybody can go swing it around, right? You like it? I asked. It was the first thing I had said unprompted, and I did not know why I said it. The floor? No, she grinned. But I'm going to earn my way up off it. Test into a real band, get noticed, maybe clear a gate someday like Rhett does. You know Rhett? The number one? He came up from nothing too, everyone says. That's the whole point. Anybody can rise here if they're good enough. Anybody can rise here. She said it like scripture, and I understood then that she had been raised on the same clean story Vera sold, and had never once been given another version to hold against it. The founder's tale was her gospel. Rhett was her proof. She believed the exact lie that was built on my erased life, and she believed it so brightly that it hurt to watch. She laughed at her own line. No one had spoken to me like that in 25 years. No one had spoken to me like that ever, really. Like I was a person who might laugh back, not a resource with a chair. It landed somewhere I did not have a wall for. I did not know what to do with it, so I just nodded, and she took the nod as friendship and kept going. That was the thing about Juno. She handed you her trust before you asked. I filed that away too, and I did not like the shape of it. A friend is a thing you can lose. I had spent a quarter century with nothing anyone could take. Now, in one morning, I had a creature hidden in my coat and a girl at my elbow, and the arithmetic of what could be used against me had already changed. They put me at a station and showed me the work. It was almost funny. Feed the core. Watch the flags. A green flag means the machine handled it. A red flag means the core is unstable and gets kicked to a bin for disposal. I watched the belt run for 10 minutes and understood the whole system in one glance, the way I understand everything about a core. The machines were guessing. Fast, tireless, but guessing. A standard floor refiner clears a core and the station reader prints somewhere around 60 to 70% efficiency, good enough to bank, not good enough to trust. About 1 core in 4 gets flagged, kicked, binned. That was the floor. That was normal. I processed my first 10 cores without thinking, one after another, and everyone came out clean, and I made myself slow down because clean was a tell. Then a red flag jammed the line. A core rode down to my station flashing red, flagged unstable, corrupted, marked for the disposal bin. The machine 2 stations up had choked on it and spat it back. The crew called those dead cores. You did not fix a dead core. You binned it and moved on. That was the rule. I looked at it. The clean line was right there, obvious. A child could see it if the child were me. I should have binned it. A bottom band. Nobody bins a dead core and no one blinks. I did not bin it. I put my bare hand on the core, found the seam, and gave it the smallest, most careful nudge I could manage, which even then was far too much, but the core was too far gone to notice too much. The corruption folded away. The poison went quiet. The clean line held, steady, spendable, alive under my palm. The station reader hummed and printed the core. Refinement efficiency, 97%, core stability, full and holding. For a second, nothing happened. Then the man at the next station leaned over, saw the reading, and went still. That one was flagged dead, he said. Machine must have misread it, I said, and set it on the belt. He did not answer. He looked at the core, then at my hand, then at my face, and I watched a small question take root behind his eyes. I had done exactly the thing I could not afford to do. I had been seen. Understand. I had not gotten stronger by fixing that core, not by a hair. The residue a single core leaves me now is a raindrop landing in the ocean they already poured into me. 25 years of a whole stockpile settled the account for good. Nothing I refine on this floor will ever move that number. What I had shown him was not power. It was that I could read a core the modern world had given up on, and hold my hand at a fraction so small it did not even register as effort. 97% on a core rated for the bin. That was control, not strength, and it was the only kind of number I am allowed to be proud of. By mid-afternoon the belt fed me a second dead core, then a third, each one printed higher. 9 needy EIGHT. Then again, 9 needy EIGHT. I did the arithmetic in my head while my hands kept moving, because arithmetic is safer than feeling anything. A C-rank refiner clears about 12 cores in a shift. I had cleared past 40 by the middle of the afternoon and binned exactly none. 40 cores, 0 bins, on a floor where a quarter of everything gets thrown away. The murmur that started around me had actual numbers behind it now, whether the crew knew it or not. New quiet guy never misses. Binned nothing all day, not one. He fixed the one the belt kicked, bare hands. You see that? Weird for a nobody. I kept my head down and my wall up and let them talk. There was nothing I could say that would unsee it. The best I could do was give them a shrug and a slow, dull face. The face of a man who got lucky and did not understand why anyone cared. Restraint is the only armor I have. I wore all of it. Then the wall slipped. It was near the end, when I was tired, and tired is when the flood tests the gate. Rhyme shifted inside my coat. It had been still all day, patient as ice, and the small motion pulled a thread of power loose from me before I could clamp it. Just a thread. But I felt Rhyme's seams answer it, a faint cold blue glow rising along the cracks in its shell for half a second, there and then gone, like a gauge ticking up and back down. The reader on the wall by my station caught the same instant. Its numbers scrambled, climbed, fell, then steadied, as if it had briefly tried to read two people standing in one body. A tech frowned at it. Readers acting up. Old floor, someone said, everything glitches. I turned my body so my coat faced the wall, and pressed my arm down over the small warm shape inside it. Rhyme went still again, understanding, its faint blue light folding back into the dark of its shell. A companion no processor could explain is not a comfort, it is evidence. It is a tell walking around on 4 cracked legs, and I had almost let it show. One slip. One thread of the flood, and a reader on the wall had caught it. Damping was survival, and damping was all I had, and damping had a seam in it exactly the width of a tired breath. Then the alarm at the far end of the line changed pitch, and I stopped thinking about my own seam entirely. 4 stations down, the belt had backed up. Cores were piling at a chute mouth, 6 of them, then 8. Red flags stacking so fast the overhead board gave up counting individually and just printed LINEUM in blunt yellow letters. A cascade. 1 dead core wedging the feed, the belt behind it shoving more dead weight into the same choke point, machines flagging every one of them unsalvageable in the same half second. I had never seen the floor stop. It was stopping. A supervisor was already shouting for a manual clear crew. Processors from 3 stations over drifted toward the jam the way people drift toward any accident, and Juno was among them, craning to see, and that meant witnesses, and witnesses meant I should have turned around and gone back to my own belt and let someone else lose an afternoon to it. I did not turn around. 8 dead cores in a wedge is not 1 dead core. My wall was still full off, no metering, nothing between flood and nothing. So clearing them by hand at that pace would cost me visibly. In effort, I could not hide behind a shrug. I went anyway. I put both hands into the jam and worked the seams the only way I know how. Wall clamped so hard my jaw ached with it, feeling for 8 clean lines instead of 1 and forcing my hands to find each of them at a fraction thin enough not to blow the wall wide open. The first core cleared, then the second, third, fourth faster, my hands moving without waiting for permission from the rest of me. By the 6th core sweat had come up on my neck despite the cold room. And by the 8th, the jam was gone, the belt sighing back into motion, and a knot of 11 or 12 processors stood in a loose ring around the chute, not talking. The wall reader over the shoe printed its number. R refinement. Efficiency, 99%. CORE stability, full, on 8 cores rated unsalvageable. A number that should not exist on that board, and it hung there in front of a dozen witnesses long enough for every one of them to read it twice. Nobody moved for a second. Then somebody laughed, too loud, the way people laugh when they need the moment to mean less than it does. Machine's broken, the supervisor said, not quite believing it. Has to be. Nobody clears a wedge like that. Lucky hands, someone offered, and the others took the excuse gratefully, the way a floor full of people always takes the explanation that lets them go back to work. I let my shoulders drop, made my face into the dull, faintly embarrassed look of a man who did not understand his own good fortune, and glanced, once, at my own wrist. Rank F bottom band. Unmoved. The reader that mattered least had told the truth, and the reader that mattered most had just been talked out of believing its own printout by a room that needed it to. Juno caught my eye across the ring and grinned like she had just watched something worth telling her bunkmates about. That's insane, she said under her breath, falling in beside me as the crowd broke up. 8 cores. 8. I've never seen anybody touch a wedge like that with bare hands, not even a senior tech. She was not suspicious. She was delighted, the way a person is delighted by a magic trick they have already decided not to question. That was its own kind of danger. A friend who wants to believe the easy version of you will hand you more room than an enemy ever would, and room is exactly what I could not afford to keep taking. I looked away first. I got Rhyme out of the building against my chest before the shift bell finished ringing, and I did not breathe easy until the gray wing was behind me. Rhyme's seams had gone dark again, quiet, patient, the cold blue banked all the way down to nothing, as if it understood that the day's one loud thing had already been spent. I understood it too. A wall reader I could talk a room out of believing was not the same as a wall reader that never lit at all, and I had used up whatever luck excuse this floor would grant me twice in one shift. I would have to be better than tired. I would have to be nothing, all day, every day, until the night I chose to be something. 2 floors up, Rhett Doyle cleared a training set for a crowd and felt nothing he was supposed to feel. Power came off him in clean, bright arcs, effortless the way it always was, and the cam loved it and the crowd loved it, and in the quiet, after the cheering he looked at his own glowing hand and could not have said where the light came from. He had been a boy when the guild found him, chosen, groomed, handed a crown he had never had to ask the price of. Talent strains somewhere, at some edge, his never had. Lately that bottomlessness felt less like a gift and more like a question he could not read. He closed the hand and smiled for the cam, because that is what the crown does. At the records desk, Vera Lang was not smiling. A notice had come down the wire an hour ago, a periodic audit, standard language, every registered power source verified against the rolls. Standard, except Vera had built a quarter century on knowing which standard things were dangerous. She ran the intake logs and her finger stopped on one line, a new bottom band entry, Grey Wing, Refiner, no academy trail, no transfer record, no prior guild. A man who had come from nowhere and lit up the lowest band, and behind him there was simply no paper at all. An untracked source on the exact week the board wanted every source tracked, a fraud she could reframe. A defector she could bury. But an absence has nothing on it to reshape, it just sits in the record as a gap, and a gap was the one thing she had never learned to spin. Flag it, she said to the empty office. I want a clean file on him by morning. She tapped the entry and held her finger there, over a name that should not have been on any list, and had no idea she was pointing straight down 2 floors of steel at the one gap in her story that could never be filled. I already put your name down, Juno said, sliding a slip across the table. Don't be mad. I read it, a shift roster. And under it, a second form, half filled in her looping hand. A ranking test. My name on both. You said you didn't have a guild before, she went on fast, before I could hand it back. So you don't have a band that means anything. If you test, they log you properly, you get real shifts, real pay. You're too good to sit at the bottom, Rook. You fix cores nobody else can touch. People are talking about it, in a good way. People are talking about it. That was the phrase that closed my throat. People talking is exactly the weather I had come here to avoid, and Juno had walked me straight into it with a smile, because to her a rumor about a friend was a door opening, not a net. I don't want to test, I said. Everybody says that the first week. She was already up, already moving, already sure. Just come to the floor tomorrow. That's all. One good shift, and you'll see. I could have refused harder. I did not, and I have thought about why. Part of it was that refusing draws its own kind of eyes, but part of it was her. She wanted a friend to rise beside her, and no one had ever wanted anything from me that was not my output. I let her drag me a step toward the light because the pull of being wanted was a thing I did not have a wall for. That is how it starts. Not with a mistake, with a kindness. I watched her go and did the math I could not stop doing. A logged test meant a real file, and a real file meant the National Ranking Board could find me, and the board finding a man with no past who read above every band was a different kind of danger than the guild finding him. The guild wanted me gone. The board wanted me counted. I was not sure which was worse. Both ended with a door. But there was a use in it too, and I made myself see it clearly. The hall was not a place a Grey Wing processor walks into. The anniversary floor was for ranked hunters and invited names. If I stayed a nobody at the bottom, I would watch the celebration on an atrium screen like everyone else, and the erasure would go on being told forever. To stand where the lie is crowned, I had to climb. Just enough, just close enough. Juno thought she was doing me a favor. She was, in a way she would never understand. She was handing me a ladder to the exact stage I needed. I would take the ladder. I would hate what it cost. Before I left the barracks, I checked my own wrist reader out of habit, the way another man checks a pocket for keys. Name, Rook. Rank, F Core, compatibility, bottom of the scale. CORE stability, low, exactly where I had damped it to sit. It was the one number in my life I was working to keep small, and it obeyed me completely, which was its own kind of comfort. The next shift, the floor gave me a test without calling it one. They had a core no one could process. It had been sitting in a sealed bin for a week, too unstable even to bin safely. The kind the machines do not just reject but flinch from. A senior processor was standing over it with two others, arguing about disposal protocols, when the shift lead pointed at me. New guy fixes dead ones, let him try that. It was meant as a joke, a way to make the nobody look foolish and put the floor back in order. The senior man smirked. Everyone gathered to watch me fail. I looked at the core. It was bad. Genuinely bad. A corruption so deep the clean line ran thin as a hair through it. A week ago on my old belt, I would have set it aside for a careful hour. But the whole floor was watching, and every second I spent being careful was a second I looked like more than a lucky nobody. So I did the thing I had not let myself do yet. I dialed. Since I woke, I had known only two settings: full off, the wall, nothing getting through. Or the flood, everything at once, a crate to splinters. There was no middle. I had believed there was no middle, the way you believe a cliff has no stairs. But a hair-thin line needs a hair-thin thread, and full off would not fix a core, and the flood would end the floor. So I reached for the impossible middle. I found the clean line in the poison, and instead of opening the wall or breaking it, I opened a crack in it exactly one thread wide, and I laid that thread along the seam. My hand shook with the effort of it. Holding a fraction back is 1,000 times harder than holding it all. Everything in me wanted the flood, wanted out, always wanting out, and I pressed back and kept the opening, the width of a hair, for 1, 2, 3 seconds. A part in 10,000 of what I actually held. The bench still creaked under it. The corruption unwound. The poison went still. The core came up clean and steady, spendable, alive. The station reader hummed over it and printed the numbers before I had let my hand fall. R refinement efficiency, 97%. Core stability, full. It had run a degree or two hot. I could feel that in the case, a faint warmth that should not have been there. Metering was still clumsy in my hands. A new muscle always shakes before it holds steady. But the number did not lie about what mattered. 97%, on a core the machines had rated dead. I set it on the belt and made my face dull again. The shift lead who had pointed at me as a joke was not laughing. He had come over to look at the reader himself, and he read the two lines twice before he said anything. That core was flagged dead, he said. Quiet now, not for the crowd. Read it again. The station read it again, same numbers. The senior processor was not smirking now. He was staring at the reader like it had insulted him. Trick reader, he said. Station's misreading. That core wasn't stable, it was flagged twice. Luck, said another. He guessed. Even a nobody gets one right. Give me his station and his access, I'd fix those too, said a third, which was the loudest lie, because he had been standing at that exact core an hour ago and had not been able to touch it. I let them have it. Envy is a wall. A man builds to keep out a thing he can't afford to believe. If they wanted to call it luck, luck kept my name small. Luck was better than the truth. I would take luck as long as they were selling it. The senior man was still talking, louder now. The way people get louder, the less sure they are. Anyone with the reader access could read that seam, he said. It's the equipment, not the man. Put me on that station. He wanted it to be the station. He needed it to be the station, because the alternative was that a nobody who came from nowhere had done in 10 seconds what he had trained 15 years and could not do at all. No one says that alternative out loud. But I watched it move behind his eyes anyway, the small sick suspicion, and I knew that the harder he called it luck, the longer he would lie awake sure it was not. That is the thing about a display. It does not stay where you leave it. You fix one core to survive one shift, and the fixing walks out of the room in a dozen heads and keeps talking after you have gone quiet. I did the other math while they argued, the quiet kind, the kind that is only for me. A trained C-rank refiner clears about 12 cores in a full shift and bins 1 in 4 as unsalvageable. I had cleared, in 10 seconds, the one core the whole floor had already binned in its head, using a part in 10,000 of what I actually carry. Scale that thread across a shift and it was not 12 cores. It was every core on the floor, with none binned, done before the first coffee break. A thread of me, aimed badly, still outclassed the floor. I filed that number away and did not let it show on my face. But I felt the sliver hanging in the air behind me, the fact of it. I had metered. Just a thread, just once, but for the first time since I woke I had aimed a fraction of myself and made it land near where I wanted. It was not more power. I have all the power there will ever be. It was the first inch of a hand to hold it with. And a hand, I was starting to understand, was the only thing that could ever get me into that hall alive. Then a voice, low from the edge of the group. What is that? Someone was pointing at the floor by my boot. Rhyme had come out. I do not know how. A gap in my coat, a moment I looked away. But the small cracked shape was there in the open, glacier blue plating catching the light, one eye brighter than the other, the seams along its body glowing, not the dark quiet they usually kept, but a clear cold blue, lit up the way a gauge lights up when there is charge to read. A dozen processors were close enough to see it burning. Is that from a core? Someone breathed. A core doesn't. Cores don't do that. It followed him. I scooped Rhyme up without hurry, the way you'd pick up any stray, and made a small annoyed sound, as if it were a nuisance I could not shake. Strays get in through the loading dock, I said. Can't get rid of it. It was thin, and I knew it. But people believe a dull answer over a wild one because a wild one asks something of them. They let it go. They filed it under strange and not my problem, which is where I needed it filed. Still, a creature no processor could name had trailed a bottom band, nobody in front of a dozen witnesses. It seems lit for anyone to see. The tail had legs now. It walked around. Every day it was harder to explain, and I could not put it back in the bin it came from, because it was the one living thing that had ever chosen me. I got through the shift, and then, walking out past the atrium, the guild showed me myself. They were testing the anniversary reel on the big atrium screens. Vera's clean story, playing for a knot of staff who stopped to watch. Ashford's rise, gate after gate, the golden ace lifting his crown. Founders' faces. Milestones. A guild that climbed from nothing to number one in the world on its own aces and its own honest work. I stood in the back of the crowd and watched 25 years of my stolen life run past with my name nowhere in it, not a mention. Not a shadow. The reel told the story of a rise I had fueled with my own hands, from a room they froze me in, and it credited every soul but the one it was built on. I watched a founder I had never met accept applause for a milestone I recognized, because I had refined the cores that made it possible, in the dark, for a wage that fit in a coat pocket, the year before they sealed me. It is a strange horror, being edited out of your own history. Not rage, not at first. Something colder and more precise. They had not just taken my time and my credit. They had gone back and made a version of the world where I never happened at all, and then they had taught it to everyone, and everyone believed it. My hand found the rail at the edge of the atrium and gripped it until my knuckles hurt. It was the only motion I allowed myself. There in the crowd, a girl in a mustard scarf was watching the same screen with shining eyes, because it was the most beautiful true thing she knew. The reel ended on the golden ace ret, lifting the crown, and the caption under him named him the proof of what Ashford stood for. Anyone could rise here, talent finds its level. I watched Juno mouth the words along with the screen, and I understood that the lie was not only about me, it was about her. It told a broke rookie in a patched coat that the system was fair, so she would keep feeding it her hope. My erasure was the foundation, and her faith was the roof, and the whole clean house stood on both. I have been used as a resource my whole life. I know the feeling of a thing being taken from me. This was worse than being taken from. This was watching people be grateful for the taking. I did not make a sound. Under pressure I go quiet. But something in me set, the way water sets to ice. I would be standing in that hall on the anniversary night. Not in the gray wing, not in the back of a crowd. On the floor of the Ascension Hall, where the lie crowns itself, on the one night the whole world is watching it. The erasure was written in a room full of applause. It would have to be broken in the same room. Anywhere quieter, and it was just one nobody's word against a beautiful reel. There, and only there, could the truth land where the lie was told. I had a date now. It sat in me like the cold used to, steady and counting down. Far above the atrium, Otto Marsh was not watching the reel. He was watching a shift log, and he did not like it. 25 years a keeper. 25 years of guarding one door and drawing one pension and not asking one question, which was the exact job he had signed up for. It had rotted something in him, the not asking, but it had kept him fed. The log flagged an anomaly. A bottom band newcomer clearing cores, the automated line rejected. Barehanded. More than once. Otto pulled the newcomer's intake image and looked at it a long time. He knew that face. He was certain of it, the way you know a smell before you can name it. Young, underfed. Ash pale. A backroom face, a face from where? He chased it and could not catch it. The trouble was, the age. The face on the screen belonged to a man of 20, and the recognition in his gut belonged to something older than 20 years. Those two things could not both be true, so his mind kept setting the thought down before it finished. I know that face, he said to the empty room. I don't know from where. And that bothers me. He minimized the image and could not quite make himself delete it. Down the corridor, Vera was already moving to make sure no one ever would. Build the newcomer a file, she told her aide. Academy trail, transfer record, the whole history. Backdated clean. I want that gap closed before the auditors ever see it. An erasure did not need a vault. Sometimes it only needed a paragraph, and past both of them, Daryl Hale heard the day's noise and set it down unread. A strange newcomer, a glitchy reader. A stray from the loading dock, the seal had held for 25 years. It would hold for one more. His certainty was a wall he had built, brick by brick out of clean years, and it did not have a crack in it anywhere he could feel, which is the most dangerous thing a wall can be, right before it learns it was standing over a door the whole time. The shift lead moved me up a row without asking. You're wasted on the tail end, he said, and pointed me to a station near the front of the floor, where the hard batches came in first and the readers ran hot all day. It was meant as a favor. A bottom band nobody who fixed dead cores belonged where the dead cores landed. He did not know he had just walked me into the light. I did not argue. Arguing draws eyes, and I had learned that lesson at the grading floor a lifetime ago. So I took the new station and understood, standing at it, that the rules had changed on me overnight. Down the tail end I could be slow. I could bin a core now and then to look ordinary. Up here the batches were watched. The front stations fed the numbers, leadership read at the end of a shift. Up here, a man who never missed would be seen not missing, all day, by people whose whole job was to notice. The ranking test had raised my profile a single inch. This was the cost of that inch. I had climbed one rung toward the hall, and it had put me under a brighter light, and the light was the exact thing I could not survive. The station itself told me how much had changed. 2 readers instead of 1, mounted at eye level so a supervisor walking the row could read a shift's numbers without breaking stride. A speaker overhead that called out batch counts in a flat, bored voice, so anyone in earshot could hear exactly how many cores had passed through my hands and how many had come back clean. Down the tail end, nobody had been listening. Up here, the numbers were the point, printed loud, repeated, compared against yesterday's board without anyone thinking twice about who was standing under them. I fed the first core and let myself think about what a reveal would cost, not in a heroic way. In a plain, cold accounting way, the way I did the math on everything. If the flood came out of me in front of this floor, if a reader spiked to a number that had no band, the whole thing came apart at once. A vault. A frost seal. A contractor who retired. I would lose the concealment, and that was survival. But it was more than that now. I would lose Juno's faith. She had signed my name to a test with a smile because she thought the world was fair. I had watched her mouth the words along with a lying reel about the guild's founding, the way you hum a song you love without noticing you're doing it. If they took me back to the cold, she would learn it was not fair at all, and I did not want to be the crack that taught her that. I would lose Rhyme's life, a creature no reader could explain, welded back together from a dead core. They would not let a thing like that live free. If I fell, it fell with me. And I would lose the cold again. I would go back through the frost seal, and this time there would be no motor left to wake me. I said it out loud, quiet, so quiet, not even the man beside me heard. A reveal cost Juno's faith, Reme's life, and the cold again. 25 years I had owned nothing anyone could take, 1 week awake and the ledger had filled. That was the moment revenge stopped being free. I turned the core over in my hands once before I opened it, the way a man checks a door is locked twice, and made myself feel the weight of it. Cold, ordinary. A dead thing waiting for a live hand. I put mine on it. I fed the next core, and the next, and I did the thing I had told myself to ration. I metered. A batch came down the line that would have broken the floor's numbers for the day, half-corrupted cores. The machines were flagging 1 in 3, the kind that turned a shift into an argument about disposal quotas. 30 cores. I counted them going in. I put my hands on the first one, found the clean line. Opened the wall a hair, laid the thread along the seam, closed it before the flood could follow. The core went warm under my palm, then still, the way a held breath finally lets go without a sound. The station reader printed the result before I had my hands off the casing. Refinement efficiency, 97%. Core stability, full. I moved to the next. 98. The next. Port 9. By the 10th core, the reader had stopped surprising me and started repeating itself. 100%. Core stability full, over and over, down the whole row, like it had run out of anything else to say. I did not overshoot once. That was the new thing. A week ago every fraction I let out ran a touch too hot. Now I could hold the crack at a hair and keep it there, core after core on command. 30 cores went in, 30 came out clean. The man at the next station had stopped working, so had the two past him. 30, one of them said, low, like he didn't want to spook it. That's 30. I've been counting. Machines flag a third of those on a good day. He didn't flag any, bare hands. I made my face dull and my shoulders tired. Slow batch, I said. Got lucky on the reads. They did not answer because there was no luck that ran 30 for 30. A C-rank refiner clears 12 cores a shift and bins 1 in 4. The board behind my station said I had cleared 30 in under an hour and binned none. That is not a number a good refiner reaches. That is a number that does not belong on this floor at all. They thought they were looking at a gifted refiner. They were looking at the largest reserve of power alive, spending a raindrop of itself to look small, and failing at even that. I heard the shape of the thought settle behind their eyes, the one none of them would say out loud because saying it made them small. That is not learned technique. Nobody learns to read a seam the machines miss. That is not skill you climb to. I stacked the empty crate, walked it to the return line, and came back for the next batch before anyone could think too long about the first one. A floor supervisor stopped at the head of the row before I could start the next crate. He did not look at me. He looked at the board, at the column of numbers my station had printed, and kept printing. Ninity 7, Ninity HT Ninity 9. Then the flat unbroken wall of 100%, running down past where the display could hold them all. He counted the run with a finger in the air, the way a man counts money he is not sure is his. 30 clean reads. No bin, no flag. He tapped the board once, as if a good tap might shake an honest number loose, and it printed on 100 again under his knuckle. He did not write it down. A number you cannot explain is a number you do not want your name standing next to, and he knew it before I did. He walked the length of my station without a word, slower than a man walks when nothing is wrong, and I fed the next core and let the reader tell him the same thing one more time. The next fraction came due an hour later, on a single unsalvageable core the shift lead had set aside as a lost cause. A week ago I would have run it a degree or two hot and had to bleed the excess off through my teeth, praying nothing showed. I opened the crack, held it level, and watched the pour land flat, no overshoot. Not a hair over the line. 0 over, where a week ago it had been 2. I felt the difference the way you feel, a held breath finally matching a metronome. I did not let myself trust it. One clean pour could be a lucky angle. So I reached for the next core on the lost cause pile without waiting for the reader to finish printing, and did it again. Same crack, same hair width thread, same flat landing. Our refinement efficiency, 100%. Twice running, on 2 separate cores, with nothing between them but my own hands deciding to repeat it. That was the part that mattered. Not that I could meter once. That I could meter on command and then do it again a minute later, and the reader believed me both times. I could dial a sliver on command now, again and again, and every single time was still a gamble that someone would add up what a sliver meant. I let a part in 1,000 out, and it landed exactly on the line, and that precision itself was a kind of confession if the right person happened to be watching for it. I had rationed and it had not been enough. That is the trap of metering. Even the smallest true display is too large when you are what I am. A sliver of me still outclasses everything on the floor, and my own wrist reader sat pinned to rank F, bottom band, COREE. Compatibility low, the number I wanted, the lie I needed, while that sliver ran circles around every reader in the building. I checked it once, at my hip, out of habit more than fear. Still pinned. Still bottom band, still the lie holding. Then the flood tested the gate, the way it always did when I was busy elsewhere. A leak started to bloom. I felt it before it showed. Cold light rising behind my own eyes, pressure finding the seam in the wall while my attention was down in a core. My hands were still moving, still opening the next casing, because stopping would have been its own kind of confession. Another second and the station reader over my head would have caught it, a number with no band, live on the wall in front of the front row. I clamped it in a single breath. I did not stop talking to do it. The man beside me asked me something about the batch quota and I answered him, dull and even, while my whole will slammed the crack shut and held the flood behind it. The cold light died before it reached my eyes. The wall reader stayed quiet. He got his dull answer and turned back to his station and never knew that in the middle of my sentence I had swallowed a tide. That is the only flex I have, not the power. The stillness over it. I stopped a tide mid-conversation, and the reward for doing it perfectly was that absolutely nothing happened, which is the whole art of staying buried. But near perfect is not perfect, and the leak had cost me. It had pulled at rhyme. I felt the small shape shift against my chest, drawn to the charge the way it always was. Its seam glow, usually dark against my ribs, came up faint and cold blue, the color it always turned near a leak, brighter than I had seen it in days, a gauge I could not switch off from the outside. A processor, 2 stations down, A lean man with the supervisor's clipboard and a habit of writing things down turned his head at the movement under my coat. "You've got something in there," he said, "not a question." "Stray," I said. "Loading dock." "Won't leave me alone." He looked at the wrong angles of it under the cloth, the faint cold seam of light that would not quite hide, and did not look away as quickly as a man looking at a stray dog should. I watched him decide not to believe me. He clicked his pen once, wrote something on his clipboard, small and careful, and slid the board back under his arm like the matter was already closed. "An unexplained creature on the processing floor," reported up. Let someone above him decide what it meant. A stray you shrug at. A thing you write down is evidence. He had just turned rhyme into a line in a report that would climb, and I could not unwrite it, and I could not put the creature back in the bin it came from, because it was alive because of me. So now the tell had a paper trail, and I could feel the light around me getting brighter by the hour. I got through to the brake bell with my head down. Near the racks, waiting for the line to reset, I heard the story told to my face. A pair of new rookies, younger than Juno, leaned on the rack. One caught the other up on the guild the way you catch up a believer, loud enough that half the break room could hear whether it wanted to or not. You know how Rhett came up? From nothing. Bottom band, no name, just talent. Anybody rises. Doesn't matter where you start, the cores don't care who's holding them. The other nodded like a hymn, and set it back to make sure she had it right. Anybody rises. The cores don't care. I stood there in a plain coat holding a flood, and listened to a child recite the exact lie I was built into the foundation of. Anybody rises, the cores don't care. I had refined the cores that raised the man they worshipped, in the dark, for a wage that fit in a pocket, and then they had frozen me next to the rest so it could bleed into me for 25 years, and taught these two to call that a fair climb. I did not correct them. Correcting them would have been the whole flood at once. But something in me finished setting, the way water finishes setting to ice. The lie was not a poster anymore. It was a voice, spoken to my face, by a girl who would have been horrified to know she was standing next to the proof it was false. I would break it where it was crowned. Not here, by a rack, to two rookies who believed it because no one had ever given them a reason not to. There. On the anniversary night, in the hall, with the whole world watching the story crown itself. Anywhere quieter, and it was one, nobody's word against a beautiful reel. I went back to my station and fed the line and let none of it show. 2 floors up, in a room that smelled of old paper and machine oil, Otto Marsh set 2 images side by side. An intake photo, new. A file photo, 25 years old, pulled from an archive he was not supposed to still have access to. The same face. Not similar. The same eyes, the same jaw, the same underfed wrongness of a man who had never eaten enough. The man in the old photo would be past 45 now. Gone gray. Gone lined. If he were anywhere at all, which the record said he was not. He had retired. Contractors retire. The new face had not aged a day past 20. "It's him," Otto said to the empty room, and his voice did not sound like his own. "He hasn't aged, that's the point. That's the whole point of him. He had turned that door himself, once, a lifetime ago. His scarred hands had put their weight on the wheel and closed the seal and not met the man's eyes while he did it. He had spent 25 years not remembering the cold coming down, and now it was all he could see. His hands were shaking. He set them flat on the desk to stop them. "Check the vault seal," he said. To no one. "Somebody check the vault seal." Down a bright corridor, in a different light entirely, Rhett Doyle turned a rumor over. It had reached him sideways, from a hunter looking to be useful. A bottom band nobody, fixing cores the machines flinched from, bare hands, never missing, and under his coat some stray no one could explain. He laughed it off, a gifted janitor. So what? The laugh didn't sit right, and he knew why. For weeks he had been carrying his own quiet wrongness. Power that came too easily. A bottomless account he had never had to fill. A light in his hand he could not name the source of. And here was a rumor about a nobody who did the impossible with his bare hands. He did not connect the two things. Not yet. He did not have the shape of it. But something in him refused to let the nobody stay a rumor. "Arrange it," he told his second. Casual, a champion humbling a challenger. Nothing that looks like fear. At the top of the building, Darrow Hale heard Otto Marsh say a thing that should not have been sayable, and for the first time in 25 years his certainty moved. Not much, a hairline. The width of a single doubt he would have crushed in anyone else. Otto was a tired old keeper near his pension, prone to the kind of ghost, seeing that guarding one door for a quarter-century breeds. Darrow did not believe him. But Otto had said the face had not aged, and Darrow, who forgot nothing he had chosen to do, remembered exactly what he had put in that vault, and exactly why the cold would keep it young. He crossed the bright room to where the dead files lived, the ones no one pulled anymore because there was nothing in them anyone wanted, and stood in front of the panel with his hands folded behind his back. "Bring me the retired contractor file," he said. His aide hesitated, an odd request, a dusty one, and went to pull it. Somewhere 2 floors down, in a cold his celebration would never think about, spending raindrops of an ocean to look small, the file's subject fed the next core and said nothing at all. They were about to go looking through dead paper for a ghost. The ghost was already in the building. Rhett came down to the gray floor himself and the whole shift felt it change. A champion did not come to the processing floor. There was nothing here for a man with a top band emblem on his shoulder, no cameras that mattered, no gate to clear, nothing but belts and readers and people who made the power he spent. So when the guild gold coat came through the doors, the floor went quiet, the way a room goes quiet when the ceiling creaks. He did not announce why he had come. He walked the rows slow, hands loose, golden and easy, and let the quiet do the work. He was looking for a face. A rumor had a shape now and he wanted to put it against a man. I hear there's a prodigy down here, he said, loud enough to carry. Somebody who fixes what the machines can't. That true? No one answered. Everyone looked at me. I did not look up. I fed a core, watched the flag, took the clean power out, and set it on the cart, the dullest man in the building. But a floor full of eyes had already pointed, and Rhett followed them the way water follows a slope. And then the gold coat was standing at my station and the light of him was on my hands. You, he said, show me. I understood the trap in one breath. This was the thing I had named at the front station, come true faster than I feared. Every choice in front of me was a bad one. Refuse, and I drew the exact attention refusing was meant to avoid. A nobody who will not perform for the champion is a nobody with something to hide. Perform, and whatever I showed him, he would measure it, and I could not show him small enough because there was no small enough. A sliver of me was too much. I had wanted the minimum tell. He had just taken the choice of how much away from me. I just clear the line, I said. Nothing to show. Everybody's got something to show. He smiled, and the floor smiled with him, because that is what a floor does around a crown. He was not cruel about it. That was almost worse. He believed he was being generous, giving the janitor a moment in the light. Come on, one clear hunter to hunter. Let's see the hands. Hunter to hunter. He did not know how funny that was. A senior processor, the one who still lay awake calling my work luck, saw his chance and took it. He does it barehanded, he said, eager, feeding the champion what he wanted. Reaches right in. It's a trick, sir, has to be, the reader's off. Then let's watch the trick, Rhett said. And he reached for a core to hand me, and the crowd leaned in, and I felt the whole thing tip toward a cliff, and then Rhett changed his mind about what kind of test this would be. Because the wrongness was in him too, and it wanted an answer bigger than a core. No, he said, and set the core down. Not the belt. Anybody can look good on a belt. He stepped back into the open lane between the stations and rolled his shoulders, and the easy went out of him and something harder came up. You want to be talked about like a hunter, you take a hunter's measure. I throw. You handle it. Simple. The floor understood before I did what he meant, and a sound went through it, half a gasp, half a thrill. This was not a refining test anymore. He was going to strike, and he was going to strike hard, and he was going to do it to a bottom band, nobody in a plain coat, to see what came out. A crowd formed the way crowds form on this floor, fast and hungry, pressing back against the belts to make a ring. Someone lifted a wrist to record it, of course they did. A champion humbling a challenger is the oldest show there is. I saw Juno at the edge of the ring. She had come at the noise the way everyone had, and when she saw it was me in the center her face changed. First delight, because her quiet friend was being noticed, and then, slower, worry, because even a rookie knows what a top band swing does to a processor. She started to push forward. Someone held her back. She called my name once, and I did not look at her, because looking at her would have told the whole floor she was mine to lose, and she was already the most expensive thing I owned. Everything in me went to the arithmetic. The station reader on the wall behind us, dark and idle, waiting to wake on whatever hit it next. The dozen lifted wrists. The rookies pressed in at my back. Rhett's feet, setting the way I had watched 100 hunters set theirs at the drill hall rail, telling me the swing was real and the swing was full. I had maybe 2 seconds, and inside them, every choice was a door I did not want to open. Rhett, a voice said, one of his own hunters uneasy. He's a processor. Then he'll be fine, Rhett said, I'll pull it. Mostly, he would not pull it. I could see that in the set of him. The wrongness in him wanted a real answer, and a real answer needed a real swing, and some part of him past the smiling meant to hit the nobody hard enough to end the rumor for good. I had one instant, and inside it, a fork. I could dodge. A body can be moved without a flood, a step, a lean, letting the blow go past, dodging exposed less. But dodging a top band strike, clean, at a nobody's speed, was its own impossible thing, and it left the swing to land on a belt, on a rack, on the rookies pressed in behind me. Someone would be hurt to keep my secret small. Or I could catch it. Catching exposed everything. Catching was the whole flood asking to come out. But catching ended it here, contained, on my own hand, with no one behind me hurt. He swung with everything he had. The power came off him in a single bright arc, the way it came off him at every clear, endless and clean, and more than he needed, more than anyone needed, because it had never once cost him a thing to make. It came at me full force, top band, a blow that would have folded a rack. I caught it with one hand. I did not brace. I did not set my feet. I opened the wall exactly one thread, laid that thread across the arc the way I laid it along a seam, and let a fraction of the flood, a raindrop, a sliver, the smallest true thing I have, meet the strongest man in the country at the peak of his swing. His power stopped against my palm and went nowhere, not blocked. Not turned. Stopped, the way a wave stops against a cliff that does not know the wave was there. His arc broke apart harmless around my fingers. I felt the shape of everything he had, all of it, the whole account he had never had to fill, and I did the arithmetic without meaning to. One thread in 10,000 of what I hold. A raindrop against a man they called an ocean, and the raindrop had not even noticed him. A candle held up to the actual ocean. I closed my hand a little, and it guttered. Behind us, the wall reader woke. It had been dark, waiting for a number worth catching, and now it had one and did not know what to do with it. Refinement efficiency climbed past the top of its own printed scale, no band under it, nothing to compare it to, and the display stuttered and climbed again, hunting for a ceiling that was not there. It could not print a grade, it could only climb. Nothing about me moved. That was the thing. My coat did not stir, my feet did not slide. My face stayed dull and tired and ordinary. I held a full-force blow from the guild's crown at a fraction of what I am, and the reader behind me was the only honest witness in the room, screaming a number it could not finish. The floor went silent, not the quiet of before. A dead silence, the silence of a room whose whole picture of the world just cracked. 100 people had come to watch a champion humble a janitor, and they had watched the janitor catch the champion the way you catch a dropped cup, while the wall behind him climbed toward a figure with no name. Rhett stared at his own arm, then at my hand, then at my face. "I hit you," he said. His voice was not a champion's voice. It was small, and young, and lost. "I hit you with everything I had. You didn't move." He pulled his hand back like the palm had burned him. "What are you?" I did not answer. There was no answer that did not open the door. "What are you?" he said again, louder, and the crowd flinched at the crack in it, because they had never heard the crown sound like that. I took my hand back and let it fall to my side, and made myself the tired, dull nobody again. Too late, far too late. "Machine's off," I said, the way you'd say it about a reader. "You pulled it more than you thought." He knew I was lying. Everyone knew. You cannot unsee a caught wave, and you cannot unsee a reader that forgets how to count. And then it got worse, because rhyme came out. The charge I had let out to catch the swing had called it. The small cracked shape slid from my coat and dropped to the floor at my heel, glacier blue plating catching the light, one eye brighter than the other, the seams along its body lighting cold and clear for the whole ring to see, for the first time, in front of dozens. It put itself between me and Rhett, low and still, and its eyes through the same cold light that lived in mine. The gauge, out in the open now, matched undeniable, read by every person still holding a lifted wrist. The gasp that went through the crowd was different from the first one. The catch had been impossible. This was uncanny. "What is that?" someone breathed. "Cores don't. A core can't make that. That's not a familiar." "What is that?" It came out of his coat. "It's got the same light. Look at its eyes." "Look at his." I scooped rhyme up. There was no dull answer big enough now, but I gave one anyway, because a dull answer is the only armor I own. "Stray," I said. "Follows the charge off the belt. I keep telling them to bin it." No one believed it. But no one had a better word, so the wild thing hung in the air, unnamed and undeniable, in front of dozens of witnesses, at least one lifted wrist, and a wall reader that had not yet finished climbing. I had wanted the smallest tell in the room. I had given the largest one it had ever seen, on camera, with the crown as my witness and a machine still counting behind me. I picked up rhyme and I walked back to my station and I fed the next core, because the only thing worse than what I had just done would be to run from it. And behind me the floor did not go back to work. It stood in a broken silence and watched me be ordinary, and not one of them could make the ordinary fit what their eyes had just refused. I felt the whole thing settle over me as I worked. I'd come here to be nothing, all day, every day, until the night I chose to be something. And in a handful of seconds I had chosen wrong, or been made to choose, and the smallness I had guarded for a week was gone. A dozen people had a story now, and stories walk. By morning the whole Grey Wing would know, and by the day after, the floors above it. I had not lost my life. I had lost my cover, which for a man like me was nearly the same thing. The only question left was how fast the news climbed, and toward whom. Juno caught my sleeve as I passed the racks at the end of the shift. "That was... Rook, what was that?" Her eyes were huge. "Nobody catches Rhett. Nobody. And the reader, it kept going, it couldn't stop. She was not afraid of me. That was the thing that closed my throat. She was thrilled for me, certain she had been right about me all along, certain the system had just revealed the diamond she picked out of the intake line. I gave her the dull face and the shrug and let her keep her version, because her version kept her safe, and a little because I could not stand to take it from her. Rhett did not follow me. He stood in the empty lane where his swing had died, and he looked at his own hand for a long time, and the wrongness he had carried for weeks finally had a shape. He had built his whole self on a simple fact. The power came to him. More than he needed, clean and endless, refilled overnight from an account he never saw. He had called it talent because talent was the only word that let him keep the crown. But talent has a ceiling. Every gift strains somewhere. And a nobody in a plain coat had just held his ceiling in one hand like it was nothing, and had a floor still left under it, deep and dark and enormous, big enough that the thing he'd used to stop it hadn't even been the whole of him, a raindrop, and the raindrop had won. The nobody's power was not smaller than his, it was the thing his came out of. He did not have the words for that yet. But he had the feeling, cold and certain, and it had a face now, a tired, ash-pale ordinary face at a bottom band station, and he knew he would never be able to unknow it. He walked off the floor without a word. His hunters trailed him, unsure. The crown had come down to end a rumor and had left with a wound. 2 floors up, Vera Lang watched the clip before anyone thought to bring it to her, and her hands went cold. A bottom band processor catching the top band one-handed, the creature. The wall reader behind them glitching, its numbers climbing toward a figure with no band. She watched it twice, fast, hunting for an angle that made it survivable and did not find one. Off band, she said to her aide, and the word tasted like a fuse. If the board sees that number, they don't audit us. They open us up. Every file, every source, 25 years of clean. She was already moving. This was the thing she was good at, not the story, the silence under it. Pull it. Every recording, every wrist that was in that ring. Corrupted feed, equipment fault, whatever fits. There was no reader spike. There was a malfunction. Get me the report before the shift ends. By the end of the shift, the footage was gone. Every clip. The wrist that had recorded it was found, and wiped with a smile and a story about equipment liability. The malfunction report existed, stamped and filed. A faulty station reader had produced an impossible reading during a training incident. Incident closed. On the record, nothing had happened on the gray floor. A champion had run a drill. A reader had glitched. Old floor, everything glitches. Vera read the closed report and let out a breath she'd been holding for an hour. Contained, she said, and believed it, because the record was the only truth she trusted, and the record was clean. But the record was not the room. Dozens had stood in that ring and watched a nobody catch the crown, and a creature made of cold step out of his coat while a reader forgot how to count. You can pull a clip. You cannot pull a memory out of 100 heads. Vera had buried the frame and left the witnesses standing, and every one of them went home that night with a thing their eyes refused to file. The story looked settled. The frame was gone, the report was stamped, the fuse was pulled. On the surface, the water had closed over the whole thing, smooth and certain, the way it always did. They thought they had buried it again. They were about to learn that the man they kept burying does not stay in the ground. The day after the catch, the floor treated me like weather. No one spoke to me about it. No one dared. But they moved around my station in a wide, careful arc, and the murmur that used to say never misses had gone quiet and grown teeth, and I understood that the whole gray wing now believed something about me it could not say out loud. That was the thing that stopped me at my station, mid-shift, with a core in my hand. They would believe me. If I stood up on the belt right now and said it, that I was the man they sealed, that the guild's whole rise was refined out of me in the dark, that the crown they cheered ran on power stolen from a frozen contractor, this floor would believe every word. They had watched me catch Rhett, one-handed. They had seen the creature made of cold. The proof was already in their eyes. I would not have to argue. Argument needs standing, and after yesterday I finally had some. One sentence, and the erasure cracked. I stood there, and I held that sentence in my mouth, and I felt how much I wanted to say it. Then, I put it down. Not because I was afraid, not because I could not. That is the part I need to be clear about, even to myself, because it would be easy to dress fear up as strategy. I could have done it. The room was ready. The want was real and it was strong, and it had 25 years behind it. I banked it anyway, because a floor is not the world. If the erasure broke here, in the gray wing, in front of processors and belts, then tomorrow it was one strange nobody's outburst against a beautiful reel, and Vera would have it stamped and closed by lunch the way she stamps everything. A malfunction. A disturbed man. Equipment liability. The clean story would swallow it and roll on, and I would have spent my one true shot on a room no camera was pointed at. the lie was going to crown itself in the hall, on the anniversary night, with the board watching and the press confirmed and the whole world's eyes on the reel. That is where it lived. That is where it had to die. Anywhere quieter, and it was just noise. So, I would wait. I would hold the strongest hand anyone had ever held, and I would keep it face down, on purpose, until the one night it could take the whole table. There was a harder version of the same math, and I made myself look at it too. Every day I waited was a day they could find me first. A day the auditors could turn up my gap. A day Otto's ghost could get a name, or a reader could catch a leak, or a review I did not know was coming could close its hand. Waiting was not safe. Waiting was a gamble against a clock. But revealing early was a certain loss, and a gamble beats a certainty when the certainty is that you lose. So I took the gamble with my eyes open, and I did not pretend it was safe, because pretending a dangerous thing is safe is how careful men die. Waiting was not weakness. Waiting was the only move that won. I told myself that, and for once the telling did not wear thin. Not yet. Not here. There. And since I had to wait, I decided to use the wait. The catch had taught me something ugly. I had stopped a top band swing and the whole floor had known in an instant that it was not skill. It was raw. It had no craft in it, no form, nothing a hunter earns, just an ocean meeting a candle. That was a tell as loud as the light in Rhyme's eyes. A man who does the impossible with no technique is a man carrying something he did not train for. And a man carrying something he did not train for came from somewhere. If I was going to move among hunters, I had to move like one. Not stronger. There was no room left in me for stronger. But I could be practiced. I could take the flood I already held and learn to shape it the way a trained hand shapes it, so that when I let a fraction out, it looked like a hunter's craft and not a frozen man's overflow. So I watched them. The ranked hunters ran drills in a hall off the atrium, and a gray-wing processor could stand at the rail on his break like any gawking nobody. I watched how they set their feet before a strike. How they spent power in a line instead of a flood, a measured push with a shape to it, economical, nothing wasted. How the good ones never overshot, because overshoot is a beginner's tell, and I had been a beginner at this exactly 1 week. I watched the same 10 drills for 6 days running. I counted the pause before a hunter released, the exact angle of a wrist at the top of a strike, the way a good one let a push taper instead of cutting it dead. None of it was magic. It was repetition made small enough to look effortless, and I had a week's worth of overflow and no repetition at all. So I started building the repetition, alone, where no reader would ever catch me. Then I went home to the small cold room I rented, and I practiced form with a fraction so small it would not have lit a reader. The first time it worked, it startled me. I moved my hand along a line the way a hunter moved his, and the sliver I let out followed the line instead of bursting off it. No overshoot. It went where I aimed and stopped where I stopped, carrying a shape now, a craft. Borrowed craft over borrowed time on stolen power. But it was mine in the only way anything had ever been mine. The second time I tried it, I aimed for something harder, no glow at all. Every prior release had thrown a faint cold light, small but visible, the kind a careful eye across a room could catch. I narrowed the thread until it ran dark, a shape with no signature. Rhyme lifted its cracked head off the floor when I did it, ears up, and made a small sound it had never made before, like it was surprised too. That was the first refine that left no light in the room to see. For a week, I had walked around holding more power than anyone alive and unable to do the smallest ordinary thing with it. Now, night by night, I counted the winds back. First, a door, closed without tearing it off its frame. Second, a cup, set down, and it stayed a cup. Third, a thread of the ocean, let out and steered along a line as fine as a hair, and it held the line the whole way. Fourth, a candle, lit by a thread I let breathe for exactly as long as I meant to and not an instant longer, and it burned steady instead of guttering out in a flash of white. None of it made me stronger. A trained hunter spends a measured push. I had learned to spend one thread in 10,000 and shape it besides, instead of spilling it. All of it made me a little more like a man and a little less like a flood, and after 25 years of being a resource in a chair, a little more like a man was the only wealth I wanted. Rhyme watched me practice from the corner, and its crack seams glowed a little warmer each night, steadier too, the way a fire settles as it catches. Not brighter because I was stronger. Brighter because I was steadier, and the one living thing that shared my charge could feel the difference before I could name it. Juno made the waiting harder without knowing she did. She found me at the rail one morning watching the hunters, and she lit up like I had done something wonderful. "You're studying up top," she said. "Good. That's exactly right. You're going to test into a real band and then you'll drill in there for real, not just at the rail." She said it the way she said everything, like the good ending was already written and we were only walking toward it. She had heard about the catch. Of course she had. But she had heard it her way. That her quiet friend had gotten the better of Rhett somehow. that the nobody she picked out of the intake line was turning out to be exactly the diamond she always said the system would reveal. She told a hunter I stood near that I was the one who caught Rhett, proud, grinning, and I watched two ranked heads turn toward me at her word, and felt the cost of her go up. That was the thing about Juno's faith. Every day it grew the price of my fall. She was pulling me toward the light with both hands, into the orbit of the very people I most needed not to see me clearly, and she thought she was saving me. "You've changed in a week," she said, studying my face like she was trying to place what it was. "You stand different." I told her it was the drills. She believed that too, easily, the way she believed everything good about me, and I let her, a little. I did not have a wall for being wanted. Then the floor handed me a core, it called impossible, and I could not make myself waste the chance to practice on it. It came down sealed in a red bin, a corruption so deep the senior crew would not even carry it by hand, worse than the one they tested me on. The clean line through it was not thin as a hair, it was thin as a thought. A week ago I would have needed a careful hour and still overshot. The old me would have flooded it clean and burned the bin. A junior processor lingered near my station, pretending to check a manifest. Word had gotten around that I did not bin cores anymore. I set the bin down slow, the way a hunter sets a stance, and let the room see me take my time. I did it with form instead. I set my hands the way I had watched the hunters set theirs. I found the impossible line. I laid a shaped thread along it, directed, economical, no wider than the seam and no hotter, guided by craft I had stolen off a drill hall rail. The corruption did not fold away in a rush. It unwound, clean, along the exact path I gave it. The station reader hummed and printed the core. Refinement efficiency, 100%. Core stability, full and holding. It had not run 1 degree hot. My metered pores the week before had run a degree or two over every time, a small bleed I had let myself call good enough. This one had not bled at all. It was not more power. I need to keep saying that, because it is the whole truth of me. The residue that core left in me was a raindrop landing in a sea that was already every sea. Nothing I refined will ever move my number again. The account was settled the day they sealed me. What was different was not the size of what I held, it was the size of the opening I could aim it through. I was not stronger, I was more exact. A part in 1,000, and it used to run hot. Now a part in 1,000 ran clean, and that gap was the whole of what a week's practice had bought me. The crew watched it, and did not even bother to call it luck this time. The junior processor by the manifest had stopped pretending to read it. "That's not a processor," one of them said, quiet, and did not finish the sentence because the end of it had no floor. Rhyme came to my heel and leaned its cracked head into my leg, and its seams glowed warm and steady, brighter than I had seen them, warmer than the night before, and warmer again than the night before that. The bond had deepened, not because either of us had grown, because I could touch the world without breaking it now, and the one living thing that shared my charge could feel me getting steady, and it settled into that steadiness the way it had settled into the charge that first saved it. For the first time since the vault, I felt something close to safe. The footage was gone. I had checked, in the small ways a nobody can check, no clips circulating, no board notice, no summons. The guild had simply closed the ground over it and moved on. I ran the count every morning like a ritual, no clip, no notice, no summons, day after day, and each clean day I added to the tally felt like a coin banked against the anniversary. I let myself believe that meant I had bought the interval I needed, weeks of quiet to shape and study and wait, until the anniversary came and I chose my moment. I had one plan and one clock, and both were mine. I felt, for the length of a few good nights, like a man ahead of the people who buried him. I was wrong, and I did not know it, because the ground I thought I had closed over the catch had never actually closed at all. 2 floors up, in the bright room, the catch had not been buried, it had been studied. "The footage is gone publicly," Vera told Darrow. "But I want to be honest about what we have." She set the frozen frame in front of him. The caught ark, the still man, the cold-eyed creature. One of her own copies, the kind she never destroyed. A bottom-band processor stopped Rhett one-handed. "I can sell the room a malfunction." "I can't sell it to you." Darrow looked at the frame a long time. The retired contractor file had told him nothing 3 days ago, which was itself a kind of answer. He had written the cleanness into it himself long ago, and knew exactly how much a clean file was worth. "The keeper says the face hasn't aged," he said. "And now this." He did not touch the frame. "Understand, I cannot have this be what it looks like." "I understand it can't be anything at all," Vera said. "A buried thing can be dug up." "You taught me that." He had. The hairline crack in his certainty hardened into a decision. "Then we don't bury it. We unmake it. I want him gone from the floor and gone from the record, both, not sealed. Sealing is what started this. I want a story that explains him away so completely, no auditor, no board, no keeper's ghost can put a face to a gap again." He paused. "And if a story won't hold him, we hold him the old way, quietly. Before the anniversary. A discredit dossier, Vera said, already writing it in her head. Fraud. No academy trail. I can have him unpersoned on paper in 2 days. Do it. And check the vault seal, physically. I want to know it never opened. Down the corridor, Otto Marsh heard the order and felt his pension and his conscience tear a little further apart. He had been carrying it since the 2 faces matched on his screen. He had turned that door himself. His hands had done it. I turned that door myself, he said to the empty corridor, testing the weight of it out loud for the first time. His voice shook. He put a scarred hand over his mouth like he could push the words back in. He did not confess. He was not ready. A man does not undo 25 years of forgetting in one shaking breath. But the fault line was open, a hair now, and he could feel the cold coming up through it. So the trap took shape around a man who thought he had bought himself quiet. Rook had banked the reveal for the anniversary, patient, certain he was ahead. He was not. They gave me the disposal bin to empty, and I emptied it into clean power in front of the whole floor. It was a full bin. A week of dead cores the machines had flinched from, wheeled out to the deep disposal because they were too corrupted to be worth a senior's hour. 40 odd of them, stacked and ashen, crusted gray where the corruption had gone furthest. The kind of load nobody clears in one sitting, and nobody expects to see cleared at all. The shift lead pointed me at it half as a joke and half as a dare, the way the floor had learned to point me at impossible things now, hoping I would fail, unable to stop watching in case I did not. I did not fail. I worked the bin core by core, with the form I had stolen off the drill hall rail. No flood. No overshoot. Each dead core came up in my hands, found its clean line, unwound along it, and went onto the cart, spendable and steady. The station reader printed as I went. R refinement efficiency, 97%. Then 90 EIGHT. Then a run of them at 90 core stability full and holding, all the way down the line. Somewhere around the 15th core the tester made me run one twice, certain the reader had glitched. It printed the same number both times. By the 30th core, he had stopped calling out numbers at all, and just stared at the board like it owed him an explanation. My own wrist reader sat clamped over the drill hall damping the whole time, pinned dead to rank AF, COE compatibility, reading low, the number I wanted everyone to see. The gap between what my wrist claimed, and what the station just watched my hands do, was the widest it had ever been, and not one person on that floor could bridge it. A floor supervisor walked past midway through, glanced at my wrist, glanced at the station board, and did a visible double-take before he kept walking, like a man who had decided not to trust his own eyes twice in one shift. 40 cores in. 0 binned. A C-rank refiner clears 12 cores a shift and bins 1 in 4 of them. A senior needs an hour on a dead core, if he'll touch one at all. I emptied the whole bin in the time it took the crew to stop pretending to work. A senior by the deep disposal cart kept the count out loud at first, the way you narrate a thing you expect to end any second. 20, he said, when I was 20 cores down and the cart of clean current had grown taller than the bin of dead ones. 22. 25. His voice thinned with each one. Around the 30th he stopped saying the numbers, and the not saying was louder than the counting had been. The station reader kept printing over his silence, Ninity EIGHT, then a long run at Ninity 9, sewer stability, full and holding, a wall of near-perfect reads with not one flagged core to break it. He looked from the board to my bare hands and back, and I watched him try to fit the 2 things together and fail, the way every one of them failed. 40 dead cores, and the count he had started out loud, he finished in his head, because saying the last of it aloud would have meant admitting what he was looking at. That's not a processor, a senior said, and this time no one argued with him, because there was no version of a processor that did what I had just done. A processor guesses. A processor bins a quarter of every batch. I had emptied a disposal bin with my bare hands and left nothing in it, and they all knew, watching, that they were not looking at a good refiner. They were looking at something they did not have a word for. I made my face dull and set the last core on the cart. The board above the station still held the last run of numbers, 99 after 99, and nobody moved to clear it for longer than felt natural. But the shaping had made me visible in a new way, and visible in that way is a thing you cannot walk back. There is a difference between being caught doing the impossible once, and being watched doing it on purpose. The catch had been a shock, a landslide, over in a breath. This was slower and worse, quieter, and a quiet tell is harder to unsee than a loud one. A man who empties a disposal bin by hand, calmly, with form, is not a man who got lucky. He is a man who has done this before, somewhere, for a long time. The shift lead who had pointed me at the bin as a dare did not laugh when I finished. He wrote something on a slate, looked at it, and crossed it out before anyone could read it. The floor could feel the somewhere and the long time behind my hands now, even without a name for it. I knew where it was leading. Every clean display walked me one step closer to the light I could not survive, and I let it, because staying small forever meant the real one. So I emptied the bin. and I felt the whole floor decide, without a word, that the nobody in the plain coat was the most interesting thing in the building. Rhett was waiting for me when the shift ended. He was in the corridor off the gray wing, alone, no hunters, no gold coat swagger, the emblem still on his shoulder but sitting on him wrong now, like a coat that had stopped fitting. He had come without an audience. That told me what kind of conversation this would be before he said a word. "Walk with me," he said. I could have refused. I did not. The rival's doubt had been the loose thread behind me since the catch, and a loose thread you either leave to unravel or take in hand. I took it in hand. I walked with him. He led me to an empty maintenance bay off the corridor, out of the cameras, out of the flow of people. The bay smelled of solvent and cold metal, racks of gear stacked along one wall, a single caged bulb throwing everything into hard shadow. For a while he did not speak, he just looked at me, the way Otto had looked at a screen, chasing something he could not catch. "I've cleared 1,000 gates," he said finally. "You know how many of them cost me anything?" I said nothing. None. He said it quietly, and the quiet was worse than anger. "The power's just there. Always. More than I need, every time, clean and endless, like somebody fills the account overnight while I sleep." I told myself for years that was talent. He looked at his own hand. "Then you caught me. One hand. And you had more left under it than I've ever had at all." He was close to it. He did not have the words yet, but he had the shape, the way a man knows the outline of a thing in the dark before he can name it. His whole record was downstream of a nobody in a plain coat, and some animal part of him had already understood that. He kept flexing the hand I'd caught him with, opening and closing it, checking it was still his. "Show me," he said. "Not a core. Show me what you did to my swing. I need to see it awake, not catch it by accident." I should have refused. Dull would not close this thread, it would only leave him doubting, and a doubting champion is a man who keeps pulling. So I showed him. Not the flood, the form. I set my feet the way I had watched the hunters set theirs, the way I had drilled alone in a cold rented room night after night. One thread out of what I carried, apart in 10,000, maybe less. I never let myself measure it too closely, sped in a straight, economical line. It went exactly where I aimed, it stopped exactly where I stopped. No wasted arc, no bleed past the line I'd drawn, no scorch past the mark. Apart in 10,000, and it still cracked the air the way a real hunter's strike would have. To his eye, it would have looked like a hunter's technique, clean and lethal in its control. It was the first time I had ever moved like that in front of another person. A trained hunter's form, over a nobody's borrowed weeks on stolen power, and it landed exactly where I placed it, not a hand's width off. Rhett watched a bottom band processor move like a master and went pale, because a janitor who got lucky is a thing you can dismiss, and a janitor with a master's control is not. "Who are you?" he said. It was not a demand anymore. It was a plea. Nobody comes from nowhere and does this. "You have a floor under you I can't see the bottom of, and my whole life is standing on top of it." I gave him one truth. Not all of them. Not my name, not the vault, not the anniversary. Those belonged to the hall, to the night the world was watching, and I would not spend them here on one broken man, however much he was owed. But I gave him the truth that would free him. "The power that comes to you," I said. "The account somebody fills overnight. You ever wonder whose hands fill it?" He stared at me. "Every clear you've ever made ran on refined power. Somebody makes that power. Somebody turns the raw poison into the clean current you spend. You never had to ask where it came from, the way a rich man never asks where the money came from, it's just always in the account. Refilled by hands you never see." I let that sit. It was refined, all of it. By a hand you were taught never to think about. Your power was never yours, Rhett. It was made, and you were handed a crown for spending what somebody else made in the dark. I watched it hit him, not like an accusation, like a key. The power with no floor. The account he never had to fill. The endless clean current that cost him nothing, while other hunters bled for a fraction of it. He had called that a gift because gift was the only word that let him keep the crown. Now the true word was in the room, and he could not put it back. His shoulders came down half an inch, the way a man's do right before he stops holding a weight he has carried so long, he forgot it was there. He did not argue. That was how I knew it landed. A man argues with a lie and goes silent in front of a truth, and Rhett went silent, and I watched the crown come off him from the inside. "It was all yours," he said, and his voice broke on the word. He was saying it to himself, out loud, so it would be real. "My power, my record. Every clear they ever cheered. I never earned any of it. I've been wearing another man's work my whole life and calling it a gift." He put his hand to the emblem on his shoulder like it had grown hot, and left it there a moment before he could make himself close his fingers around it. "Is it you?" he said. "The hands. Is it you?" I did not answer that. That was the hall's to answer. But my silence was answer enough, and he closed his eyes, and the doubt that had ridden him since the catch finished turning into knowledge. He knew now, not everything, But the one thing that mattered, that the crown was hollow, that a nobody in the Grey Wing was the reason he had ever been a somebody at all. He stood there a long moment with his eyes shut, and when he opened them again, something in his face had already rearranged itself around the new truth. "I'm not going to be their proof anymore," he said low, "whatever you are. Whatever they did. I'm done being the poster over it." I left him in the maintenance bay. The rival's doubt was closed. What stood in its place was a man with nothing under his crown, and a choice forming behind his eyes I could not yet read. I walked the long way back to the Grey Wing so my hands would stop shaking before anyone saw them. 2 displays in one shift, the bin, then Rhett, and both of them clean, both of them shaped, and I still made myself run the math on the walk the way I ran it every night in the rented room. 40 cores at a fraction so small it should have registered as nothing, and it had still read near perfect on every readout the station owned. One demonstrated thread for Rhett, a part in 10,000 of what weighted under it, and it had still knocked the color out of a top band hunter's face. The margin between what I showed and what I carried was not shrinking. It was the only thing keeping me alive, and today I had spent 2 days worth of it in one afternoon. Back in the cold room I kept, Rhyme's scene glow lifted off dark the moment I crossed the threshold. A slow, warm pulse, not the frantic blue of a leak, steadier than I had ever felt it. It read me before I said a word. Something in the day had gone right, and it knew. I sat with a hand near the glow until my own pulse matched it, and for the first time since the catch, I let myself think the word control instead of the word luck. 2 floors up, in a cold I knew better than anyone alive, they were checking the seal. Otto Marsh stood at the vault door with the ring of keys in his scarred hand and could not turn the wheel. Beerus people had ordered the physical check, confirmed the seal never opened, log it, put the ghost to rest on paper. It should have been nothing. But Otto had pulled the transport records first, and the records were what broke him. No transfer, no release. No convoy, no body moved. The man had retired and gone home, and there was no road on paper for him to have gone home on. He had walked into this vault 25 years ago and, on paper, simply stopped, which meant he had never left. Which meant, if he was walking the floor 2 levels down with a face that had not aged, there was only one door he could have come out of. "It has to be him," Otto whispered. "There's no other door." His hand stayed on the cold wheel a long time. He had told himself, 25 years ago, that the deciding belonged to someone above him and his hands were clean. They had never been clean, he had always known it. He read the seal, it logged intact. He wrote it down with a shaking hand, and he did not open the door. In the bright room, Darrow heard the seal was intact, and the transport records were empty, and he did not crack. A lesser man breaks there. Darrow sealed the impossibility behind the same wall he sealed everything behind. The seal held, therefore the man on the floor was not the man in the vault, and he would spend no more certainty on it. "Execute the dossier," he told Vera. "Today. Discredited and off the floor before the week is out. Then I want him held. The old way, before the anniversary." His voice did not rise, it never rose. "Nothing walks into that hall that I did not put there myself." His certainty was armor without a crack in it he could feel, which is the most dangerous thing armor can be when the blade is already inside the room. Rhett Doyle, alone in the maintenance bay, took the emblem off his shoulder and held it in his hand. It had been the proof of him, the crown, the whole story. It was worth nothing now. He did not know yet what he would do. He only knew what he would not do. He would not stand at Darrow's shoulder on the anniversary night and lift a hollow crown to a cheering hall. Unseen by him, unseen by the nobody who had just freed him, the guild sent the order down the wire to bury that nobody one more time, before the anniversary he was quietly counting on. The rival had defected in his heart, and the clock to seal Rook back into the cold had started to run. The dossier hit the floor 2 days before the anniversary, and I felt the ground go out from under the quiet I thought I had bought. It came the way an unmaking comes, not a hand on my shoulder but a change in the weather. My station access was flagged. A notice went up that a Grey Wing processor was under review for fraudulent intake, no academy trail, no transfer, a man who had lied his way onto the floor. My name, in the flat gray type of an accusation. And under the notice, unwritten but plain to anyone who knew how the Guild worked, was the older, colder thing. A man they could not explain on paper, was a man they would move off the paper entirely. I had banked the reveal for the anniversary because I thought I had weeks, I had days, and they were being taken from me one at a time. I understood then that I had been wrong about the buried footage. They had never dropped it. The smooth water I had mistaken for safety had been the surface over a plan, and the plan had my name on it, and it moved faster than my patience. I should have seen the shape of it sooner. A guild that seals a man in the cold to farm him does not lose the habit of solving problems permanently. I had let a few quiet nights convince me they had forgotten how. They had not. The review was the polite front of the thing. Behind it, in the language nobody wrote down, was the old solution, the one that did not need a trial or a sentence, only a door and a cold and a story about a contractor who moved on. They had done it to me once with a smile. They meant to do it again before the week was out, and this time there would be no motor left to open anything. The horror of it was familiar, and that was the worst part. I had been here before, walked into a room that called itself an assignment and was a grave. I knew the smell of it now. Knowing did not make it smaller, it made it colder. Then they showed me they had done their arithmetic on me, the same arithmetic I could not stop doing on myself. They took Juno first. Not roughly, that is not how this guild does anything. She was pulled off the floor for a records review of her own, flagged as the intake sponsor of a fraudulent hire, her rookie standing suddenly in question, her path up the one thing they knew she cared about held hostage to my cooperation. A supervisor told me, mild and reasonable, that her situation and mine were linked, and that a quiet resolution to mine would resolve hers, and that an unquiet one would end the only future she had. They knew. They had watched me the way I watched everything. They had found the one human tie I owned and put their hand on it. She had signed my name to a test with a smile, and now the smile was the leash they meant to lead me by. This was the cost, arrived in full. I had named it at a front station days ago. Juno's faith, Rhyme's life, the cold again, and named it like a man counting coins he might spend. Now it was not counting, it was the bill. To keep concealing, I had to let them break a girl in a mustard scarf whose whole crime was believing the world was fair. To protect her, I had to stop being no one. There is a particular cruelty in how they did it. They did not threaten me. A threat to me would have meant nothing. I had spent 25 years past the reach of anything they could take from a man alone. So they did not aim at me. They aimed at the one soft place I had grown in a single week, the place I had not had time to build a wall around. They knew a man who owns nothing cannot be leaned on, and a man who owns one thing can be leaned on with his own heart. I had let myself have a friend. That was the lever, and I had handed it to them by having it. The reckoning was not loud, it never is, in me. It was cold and level and very clear. And then they reached for Rhyme. The review of my fraud required, the notice said, the seizure of unregistered biological assets connected to the accused. A creature no reader could explain. They came for it at the Grey Wing with a containment case, 2 men and a case, to take the one living thing that had ever chosen me and log it as evidence in the story of my unmaking. Rhyme knew before they reached us. It always knew. It pressed into my chest, seams glowing cold, and I felt the light come up in my own eyes to answer it, and for one breath the flood pressed on the wall so hard, I nearly let it all out right there. Which was exactly what they wanted, a nobody flooding a Grey Wing corridor with power that had no band, on no camera that mattered, where it could be stamped a malfunction and buried with the man. I did not flood the corridor. I did something smaller and harder. I stepped between the case and the creature and let a fraction out, shaped, controlled, the exact form I had drilled alone night after night, not a spill, a measurement. A part in 1,000, aimed at one seam of hinged metal. A flood would have opened that case and every reader in the corridor with it. A part in 1,000 only warped the latch, and nothing else in the building noticed it happen. Enough to warp the case in the men's hands until it would not close, and not one thread more. Rhyme's seams glowed once, bright, and went dark again the instant the case failed. Quiet. Precise. Deniable. It's a stray, I said, dull, while their case folded uselessly. Take it up with the loading dock. They looked at the ruined case and at my flat, tired face and could not make the two things fit, and in their hesitation I took Rhyme and I walked, and they let me, because men who cannot explain a thing would rather report it than touch it. But the point was made. Concealment now cost the ones I had saved. Every hour I stayed, no one was an hour they could hurt to move me. The wall I had held to survive had become the thing they leaned on to break me. So I stopped holding it as survival and started holding it as a choice with an end. I would walk into the hall. Tonight, banking the reveal was over. They had made it impossible by reaching for the two things I could lose. If I waited even one more day, there would be no Juno to save and no Rhyme to bring, and the erasure would close over all three of us for good. The clock I had set for myself had become their clock too, and it had run out for both of us at once. There was a grief in that decision I did not let myself feel until later. For 1 week I had owned things. A creature that chose me. A girl who handed me her trust before I asked. A plan that was mine, on a clock that was mine, moving toward a night I had picked. Tonight I was going to spend all of it at once. The safety, the patience, the careful smallness I had built out of a quarter-century of being no one. Revenge, it turned out, had never been free. It cost exactly the things I had only just learned I could have. I had walked in here to take everything back. I was learning what it took to do it. I got Juno a message through a hand I trusted on the floor. 3 words, be in the hall, and I did not explain, because there was no explaining it small. Then I set Reem against my chest and went to slip a trap the guild had built to hold the strongest man alive. They had the Grey Wing watched. Access flagged, exits noted, the review's men posted at the doors a bottom band nobody would use. They had planned for a processor. They had not planned for me because they did not believe in me. The seal had held, the record was clean, and a thing that cannot be true does not need to be planned for. I did what I had never done before. I combined the two hands I had learned. Not the flood. The flood would bring the building down and every camera with it and make me the malfunction they needed. Not the bare fraction either. A fraction alone was survival, not passage. I dialed toward the whole of it, metering and shaping at once, measured and directed, a hunter's aim laid over a rationed pour. Enough to move like no processor could move, not so much that a reader 3 floors off would spike. The first door was a checkpoint. 2 of the review's men leaned against it, bored, waiting for a processor who would run. I did not run. I let my shoulders drop. I let my feet drag. I let my face go slack. A man sent home early. One glanced at my band and read the lowest number there is. Rank F, dead last, a reading that told him I was not worth a second look. He believed the number, because the number had never once lied to him before. He looked away before I reached him. I passed close enough to smell the coffee going cold in his hand. Neither turned his head. A nobody is the easiest thing in the world not to see, and I had a lifetime of practice being one. The stairwell was worse. They had sealed the service door with a magnetic bolt, the kind built to hold a ton. A processor could not open it. A flood would tear it off its housing and wake every reader in the shaft, and every guard between here and the hall besides. So I did neither. I set 2 fingers against the bolt and laid a thread of the ocean along its seam, patient, exact, no wider than a hair, a fraction so small it barely counted as spending any of it at all. The metal did not scream, it sighed. The bolt eased back without a spark, and the door swung for me like it had been waiting. I closed it behind me just as soft. Rhyme's seams glowed once against my chest and went dark again. I felt every reader I passed reach for me and come up empty. That was the shaping. A week ago they would all have screamed off their scales at once. Now I moved through the building like a held breath, dialing the whole ocean down to a level the walls could not hear, and the walls stayed quiet, floor after floor, reader after reader, printing nothing, finding nothing, asking nothing twice. Somewhere behind me a station reader would log an empty hallway and never know what had just walked through it, carrying every core that guild had ever bled. It was the hardest thing I had ever done with the power, harder than the catch, harder than the flood. To carry all of it and let none of it show on the move, through a net built to catch exactly what I was. My hands did not shake this time. Somewhere in a cold rented room, night after night, I had drilled the shaking out. The last stair was long. I climbed it slow, 1 step at a time, a plain coat rising into a light built for crowns. Guards flanked the high doors in dress gray, scanning invitations, checking faces against a list. I had no invitation. I had no face they knew. I walked up into their light and did not stop, and the way I moved made them not reach for me. A hand can be aimed at a lock. It can also be aimed at the small space around a man, so that stopping him feels like the wrong idea before anyone thinks to have it. I aimed it there, a measured fraction, nothing more. The guard's eyes slid off me the way water slides off oiled cloth. I stepped between them into the hall, and neither one remembered, a breath later, choosing to let me by. Rhyme stayed against my chest the whole way, still, patient, cold, understanding the way it always understood. It had come back to life in a vault. It was not going to be logged into a case now. Wherever I was walking, it was walking there too. The Ascension Hall sat at the crown of the guild, and on the anniversary night it blazed. Light poured out of its high doors into the atrium. The press was there, and the board, and the ranked and the invited and the whole glittering weight of a guild celebrating 25 years at number 1 in the world. I came up out of the gray wing in a plain coat 2 sizes too plain, with a cracked creature against my chest, uninvited, unplaceable, and I stood at the edge of the hall floor and let the light of the celebration fall on me. I had said I would be standing here, not in the gray wing. Not in the back of an atrium crowd. Here, on the floor of the hall where the lie crowned itself, on the one night the whole world was watching it. I was here. Now I only had to let them see me. Darrow Hale stood under the brightest light in his life, more certain than he had ever been. The dossier was filed. The nobody was discredited on paper, being moved off the floor even now. The seal was checked and logged intact. The keeper's ghost was laid to rest. Every loose thread of a strange month had been pulled tight, and tonight the record got carved into history where nothing could reach it again. He had staged this confidence, brick by brick, year by clean year, and tonight it reached its full height. He looked out at the board and the press and the crowd and felt, with the whole certainty of a man who had never once been caught, that the story was his and would outlive him exactly as he wrote it. Not a crack in it anywhere he could feel, which is the most dangerous thing certainty can be when the blade is already in the room. 25 years, he told the hall, and his voice filled it, built on nothing but our own hands and our own aces. Let me show you how we rose. He gave the signal and the reel began. Vera Lang's clean story played across the great screens and the crowd turned up their faces to it, Ashford's rise, gate after gate. The founders. The golden ace lifting his crown to a roaring hall. A guild that climbed from nothing to number one on its own honest work, every founder credited, a beautiful unbroken line. There was a man who should have been in that footage and was not. The reel ran to its end without him, the way it had run for 25 years, and the crowd watched the lie crown itself and did not know it was a lie. And on the floor of the hall, below the screen, unbilled and unplaceable, the man that reel had erased for 25 years took one step forward out of the crowd. The step was small, but the room felt it the way a room feels, a draft from a door that should not be open. A face turned, then another. A murmur started at the edge of the floor and spread inward. Who is that? Who let him in? Who placed him? Until the whole shining hall was turning, by ones and tens, away from the reel and toward the plain coat, the cracked creature, the tired, ash-pale, unaged face no one on the guest list could name. Darrow turned last of all. And there, on the floor of the hall he had built to crown a life he stole, on the one night the whole world was watching, stood the man he had sealed in the cold, awake, unaged, and about to speak. I let it out. Not the fraction. Not the sliver. Not the shaped thread that had carried me through 100 shifts. For the first time since they woke me, I opened the wall all the way. On purpose. Cleanly, I let the whole of it stand up in the room. 25 years of a guild's entire stockpile rose off me at once. It had bled into a sleeping man and compounded past every band that existed. It came up like a tide filling the Ascension Hall wall to wall. But it did not overshoot. That was the part I had spent every cold night learning. It did not shatter the floor. It did not blow out a single screen. It filled the hall to its edges and stopped exactly where I told it to stop. Controlled. Precise. Total. An ocean held perfectly level in two open hands. Every wrist reader in the room woke at once and screamed. Core compatibility. Climbing. Ninety%. Ninety 5. The numbers did not stop where numbers were supposed to stop. Refinement efficiency. Ninety 8%. Ninety 9. Pause. A flicker. Then the field blanked and tried again from zero, because the housing had never been built to count past 100. Not one reader could print a final figure. They scrambled. They climbed past 100% and kept climbing. They ran off the top of their scales, off the new top band, off every band the modern world had ever built, and found nothing left to land on. There was no band for what I am. The board's own certification instruments, brought to grade a guild's proudest record, lit up with a reading they had no grade to hold. Somewhere behind me a tester's voice cracked. Run it again. Nobody ran it again. A second technician tried a hand unit, then a third, then the master console at the judge's table itself, and every one of them found the same blank field where a number should have been. There was nowhere higher to send it. Rhyme stepped out beside me into the open. Its crack seams blazed a cold, clear blue, matching the light in my own eyes. The whole hall could see it plainly. The man and the creature ran on the same impossible charge. Living proof, on 4 cracked legs, that no one below full saturation could ever fake this. I was not stronger than the morning I broke a crate with Aline. I want that understood, even now, even here. Nothing on that floor had made me grow. I had held this exact ceiling since the day they woke me too raw to swing a fraction of it. What changed was not the size of the ocean. What changed was that I could finally hold it up in front of the world without spilling a single drop. The arc was never more power. It was learning to wield the power they had stolen into me. I had learned it. Here it was. Level. Clean. Mine. The hall did not cheer. It went silent, the deep silence of a whole room's picture of the world cracking at once. Into that silence, I spoke. You graded this worthless, I said. You dropped it. You put it in a back room, a collar, a chair. Then you found out what it did. Instead of freeing it, you sealed it in the cold. You let your fortune bleed into it for 25 years. I looked at the crowd, at the board, at the press, at the great screen still glowing with a lie. Everything you built. Everything you're celebrating tonight. It was made downstream of the man you buried. This is what you were farming. It woke up. A voice broke from the edge of the floor. It was the golden ace. Rhett stepped out of the crowd, the top band emblem in his open hand. He did not lift it. He turned to the press, to the board, to the whole shining hall, and said the thing that ended his own crown. My power was never mine. His voice carried, clear, and did not shake. A man who is already broken in private does not break again in public. He only tells the truth. Every clear they cheered. Every gate. The reserve somebody filled overnight while I slept. It was refined. By him. In the dark. I never earned one moment of it. The guild's number 1 was a poster over a man they kept in a vault. He looked at me, then at the emblem, and let it fall. It was all yours, the whole time. The board's instruments finished what Rhett started. 2 signatures went up on the great screen side by side. RHET Doyle, unknown reserve. A technician read the match count aloud before anyone could stop him. 99.9%. Same residue. Same hand. The board pulled Rhett's last 12 certified clears and ran them again, live, against the reserve on the floor. 12 matches. 12. Not one exception in the batch. Every clear Rhett had ever logged traced home to the reserve standing on the floor in a plain coat. The strongest man in the country stood revealed, in front of the press, as the spender of another man's stolen work. The power gap closed in front of everyone, not in a maintenance bay. Not in a whisper, here where they had come to crown it. Then the unaged face did what the record could not survive. Vera's people had logged the seal intact. The transport records were empty. Both facts now stood in the same room as my face. A man of 25 years gone, unaged, breathing, in the hall. The retired contractor file said I had left. There was no road I had left on. The clean story required me to be anywhere but here. 100 cameras were recording that I was here. A lie cannot hold two true things at once. The betrayer's clean quarter-century collided with the ghost standing in the light. No paragraph left could keep them apart. At the side of the hall, an old man in a keeper's coat put his scarred hands to his face and broke. Otto Marsh had guarded one door for 25 years, drawing a wage for the guarding. He had told himself he was only the hands. He looked at the man on the floor, unaged, exactly as he had gone into the cold, and 25 years of not asking tore open at once. I turned that door myself, he said, and his voice cracked the silence like ice. He said it to the board, to the press, to the crowd, to whatever was left of his own soul. The seal. I turned it. My hands did it. He walked in, and I closed the cold on him, and I didn't meet his eyes. He was weeping now, an old man's ugly weeping, decades of it. God help me, I turned it myself, he was in there the whole time. There was no spinning that. A confession from the man who owned the keys is not a paragraph you can rewrite. Otto had guarded the lie's last door for 25 years. He had just thrown it open with his own broken hands. 2 board clerks were already writing his words down verbatim, because a keeper's own confession, time-stamped and witnessed, would outlive any statement Vera's office could draft by morning. At the head of the hall, under the brightest light, Darrow Hale watched every prop of his clean story fall at once. The reel. The record. The ace's crown. The intact seal. The empty transport logs. The discredit file, worth nothing now against a face 100 cameras were recording. The keeper's confession. 25 years of certainty, staged brick by clean brick to exactly this height, on exactly this night. It came down all together, the way a wall comes down when the ground under it turns out to be a door. He looked at me across the hall he had built to bury me. For the first time in a quarter century, the man who forgot nothing he had chosen to do could not make the world obey him. Behind him, the great screen still ran his own gala reel, on a loop, over footage of a vault door he had personally signed to keep shut. Nobody in the hall was watching the reel anymore. Every eye had already moved to him. You were sealed, he said. His voice was not the guildmaster's voice that had filled the hall a minute ago. It was smaller, older, coming apart. You were graded worthless. You were dropped. You retired. You were... He stopped. The words he had believed for 25 years would not carry weight anymore, the way a coin worn smooth stops being money. You don't exist. I made sure of it. I made sure. There's no road out of that vault. There's no version of this where you're standing here. Then, quieter than the whole hall, quiet enough that only the front row and every microphone caught it, the last of him gave way. How, he said, not a demand. Not a threat. A man at the bottom of his own certainty, looking up at the thing that was never supposed to be possible. How are you here? How? I did not answer him. I had waited 25 years and 1 week for that question to land on his face. The answer was the whole story, and the whole story was already standing in the room. Behind him, Vera Lang had gone white, her hand moving toward the crowd, her mouth forming the only reflex she had left. Nobody will believe him. And stopping there, because for the first time in her career, the room already did. The story had run clean for 25 years. It would never run clean again. I turned from Darrow to the hall and took back what they had built on me, on screen, where the lie was told. The credit is mine, I said, loud enough for the press and the board and every camera, so it would sit in the record and not in a whisper. Every rise this guild sold as its own. The time is mine. 25 years they took while I could not feel a single day of it. Whatever this guild becomes after tonight, it becomes knowing whose life it was built on. I let the power settle level around me, controlled, undeniable, a reading the board could not grade and could not unsee. I don't need a band to certify what I am, you already read it. It's off your scale, write that down. The board wrote it down, their own instruments had already set it for them. The off-band reading they had brought to certify a guild's record had certified, instead, the man that record erased. The ranking board that wanted every source counted finally had its untracked source, standing in the light above the top of every scale it owned. Revenge did not look like a blade. It looked like a record correcting itself in public. It was quieter than I had imagined, in all those years in the cold. It was heavier. It was complete. Near the front of the crowd, a girl in a mustard scarf stood with everything she believed coming apart and reforming around the truth. Juno had come because 3 words told her to. She had watched the reel she once mouthed along with 100 times. She had watched her quiet friend step out of the crowd and become the largest thing in the world. I watched her face do the hardest thing any face in the hall did that night. Not the shock. Not the tears. The turn. The moment the clean story she was raised on fell away, and the true one took its place. Everything they told me, she said, and the crowd near her heard it, because she was the crowd. Every believer in that hall given one voice. Everything I believed. Anybody rises. Talent finds its level. It was you. The whole time, it was you they buried to build the thing I believed in. She was not broken by it. That was the part I had not let myself hope for. She looked at me, at Rime, at the board writing down a reading with no band, and the faith did not die in her, it reformed. It came back around the truth instead of the lie. I watched the crowd turn with her because she was the one they could believe. Not the ace, not the keeper. Not the ghost, the rookie in the patched coat who had believed the story hardest of all and was now believing something better. The public reread was complete. The room that came to crown a lie left knowing whose life it was built on. And when it was done, when the record was corrected, the crown was on the floor, the keeper had confessed, and the guild master had asked how into a silence that would not answer him. I did not stand in the center of it and burn. I crouched, slow, the way I had crouched on a vault floor a lifetime ago. Rime pressed its cracked head into my palm. Cold. Alive. Mine, in the only way that word had ever meant anything. The hall was loud around us now, the press, the board, the crowd, all moving at once, but the small space between my hand and the creature's head stayed still. Unhurried. Quiet. They had scored me worthless and built a world on being sure of it. They had kept me because I was too small to matter and too useful to waste. By keeping me, by farming me, by letting their fortune bleed into a sleeping man for 25 years, they had made the very thing they threw away into the largest reserve of power any person had ever carried. But that was never the part that mattered to me. I had known I was the value the day they read my number and hid it. What I got back tonight was not the power. I had always had that. What I got back was the record admitting it, and the quiet, private thing under the record. The thing no board could grade and no reel could erase, which was simply this: I had never been the waste. I was always the worth. I did not need them to say it. But I let them say it anyway, in front of the world, once, for the record. Rime leaned into my hand, and its seams glowed warm. For a long moment I did not move at all, I did not need to. But an ocean held level in one room does not stay in one room. The board's instruments had printed a reading with no band, and readings like that do not stay quiet. A copy of tonight's log was already routing upward before the crowd had finished filing out, first to the regional office, then, within the hour, to a desk that only opened a file when a number broke every scale under it at once. Before the night was out, the word was already climbing, off the guild, off the city, up toward the national bodies who kept the scales I had run off the top of, toward the deeper gates and the worst things the modern world had learned to fear while I slept. A guild had made me by accident and spent 25 years pretending I did not exist. That was over now. But the thing they had made was already too large to belong to one guild, one record, or one hall. It would need a body with a bigger scale, and there was no such scale yet built. They had built their world on burying me. I had taken it back. And in taking it back, I had become a problem far bigger than the people who buried me ever imagined. A reserve with no band, walking out of a vault into a world that had no place ready to hold it, and no idea yet that it was coming. I followed none of them out. They followed me.